Waiters. What's the worst first date you've ever seen? Okay, so I've been a bartender and a waiter over the years, and I've witnessed a couple of really sad moments, a couple of bizarre ones, and one that was just ruthless. This one, though, was the best of them all. A good-looking dude, fit, clean-shaven, kind of looked like Jim Cantore from the Weather Channel, but younger and slimmer. He was sitting at the bar going on about how he had a date with this girl that his best friend was crushing on hard. His friend just refused to ask her out because she was into him instead. He was really getting into his story when she walked in, and he froze up like someone stunned him. By anyone's standards, she was gorgeous, owning it in a little black dress and high heels. Anyway, she comes up and they do a little greeting. She orders a tequila with a lime. He does one with her, and they banter about getting that one out of the way and move into a little more banter. Out of the blue, this dude whistles at me. I was shocked, honestly, as the bar was pretty empty. He whistles at me again while I'm looking at him, trying to figure out if he really just whistled at me like a pet. Yo man, more drinks. Disappointed, as he really kind of seemed like a nice guy, I went to pour him a drink and let him know I'm not a pet and that he does not need to whistle to get a drink. Sure, man, no worries, just keep an eye out. We're going to get hammered, yo. I retreat to the sidebar real quick, and one of the other guys working that night starts to talk to him while the girl goes to the ladies' room. When she gets back, he whistles at the other bartender again and shouts, "Hey man, where are my drinks? Pronto." This guy starts just hammering drinks. Not crazy, but pretty damn quick as he's through at least 5. The girl only did the one and is sitting there sipping it like a win. The dude, who we will now call Yo, starts to get a bit sideways. Nothing big, just loud, laughing at his own jokes and talking over the girl every chance he gets. He then announces that he has to take a leak on a rock and walks to the back. The girl looks mortified and sad. She's texting away furiously. Then I hear him in the back raising some cane, and out he comes with a dude under his arm. They sit down and he starts talking to a different girl at the bar. He's not really hammered, but well on his way, and says something out loud to the other girl and walks outside. His friend follows quickly after, and the girl is left at the bar alone. 5 minutes later, the friend walks in, sits down, and has a drink with the girl. I hear him say that he put him in an Uber and sent him home. They walk to go to the place the other dude had reservations for them at. I honestly thought, good for you, dude. About 30 minutes later, Yo Boy walks back in, sober as the day he was born. He sits down, waves me over, and apologizes for whistling at me, gives us $20 and buys us a drink for when we get off. I was off at this point and sat down to have mine with him. He lets me in on his game. He did it all for his friend. Got half buzzed, played the fool, and called his friend to come save the day. He honestly said, he's a better man for her than me. She's really just not my type. I was stuck between awe and impressed. They all came in about a month later, looking all buddy-buddy, the trio of them. That Yo guy went from potentially ruining the night to redeeming himself in an unimaginable way. His dedication to his friend's happiness, even at his own expense, shows true character. Plus, who doesn't love a happy ending where everyone ends up friends? Story 2. My brother's girlfriend set me up on a blind date with her friend who, in her words, totally digs heavy guys. So I go to pick her up and my alarms go off. Well, she's not a 9 out of 10, she's definitely what most would consider out of my league. I try to talk to her on the ride. At most, I get single-word responses. We get to the place to eat, a steakhouse that's noted in my area for being nice but not super expensive, and we get our table. We order our food. While waiting, I try to engage her in a conversation. Simple things like asking if she's from around here or if she has any hobbies. She just taps on her phone and gives me mostly 2-word answers. When our food arrives, she picks up her plate and heads to a completely different table, saying her friend showed up. I, apparently, was not invited. Meanwhile, she's sitting at this other table with quite a bit of expensive food. I blink for a moment and call the waiter over and explain the situation. I request separate checks. He agrees and I go ahead and pay for my own food. She starts ordering drinks, not just for herself but for all of her friends. I finish what I can of my food. About an hour later, she comes back over and says she's ready to leave. I wave the waiter down and inform him that she's ready to go. He brings her a check for well over $100. She just smiles, looks at me, and pushes the check towards me, explaining that I was paying. I push it back and firmly tell her that I'm not paying for her friends' expenses. I get up, smile at her, and say, "I've had a lovely time tonight. I hope you have a good time paying your tab and finding a ride home that doesn't involve the police." My brother's girlfriend started blowing up my phone an hour later, furious about how I could treat her friend that way. So, to whoever that waiter was, you're the man. Keep the $20 tip. Story 3. My bar has 2 floors, and on this night I was working upstairs. A couple came up with drinks they had already bought and sat in my section. I went to introduce myself. The girl seemed nice, but the guy said nothing, just stared at his drink. They eventually ordered another round, and as I was dropping off the drinks, I heard the guy slur out, "Thank you very much." It was just a drink away, Nothing too strong, but it would be his last round. I continued with my duties for a while. At one point, I glanced up at the table. The girl was gone, and the guy looked like hell. I thought to myself, oh, he looks like he's about to. And right then, he hurled. Not much came out, and he tried to pass it off as a cough, but I saw enough pour out onto his chair and the floor. I grabbed my assistant and trash can. The assistant got to work on the mess, and I put the trash can in the front of the guy. I told him to go to the bathroom, take the can with him on his way out, and then get out. He said nothing, just stared at his phone for a minute, then got up and left. I hurried around looking for his date. I found her at the bar trying to pay her tab. I tapped her on the shoulder and tried to tell her about her date, but when she turned around, her face told me everything. That's when she told me it was their first date. They had met through a mutual friend and she really didn't know him at all. My bartender and one of our awesome regulars overheard. We paid her tab. She ended up staying at the bar, hanging out for a while as the regular brought her more drinks. Story 4. I'm not a waiter, but a bartender in a college town. This happened last Wednesday. It was a slower night when a guy and a girl sat down at the bar. Clearly, they weren't students at the school I attend. I checked their IDs. It was the guy's 21st birthday. I offered them a discounted round and had a drink with him. They seemed like nice people. It turned out they were from a small town near mine, staying with friends in town for the night. They bought a few rounds and we made small talk, the usual routine. The girl kept eyeing me, and I got the sense that she was into me. I kept my distance to avoid ruining this guy's birthday, but as she got buzzed, she called me over more often for no reason other than to blatantly flirt in front of him. He couldn't stop glaring at me, which was understandable. The guy went to the bathroom. While he was gone, she asked if I could come out from behind the bar. I said yes, depending on the scenario. She then asked if I could take a picture of her in front of the famous mural on the wall. I agreed, and walked with her across the dance floor. She posed next to the sign. I snapped a couple of pictures, and just as I was about to hand her phone back, the guy came walking out of the bathroom. She looked at him and said something like, "Oh good, could you take a picture of us in front of the sign?" He reluctantly obliged, and she wrapped her arms around me in the most uncomfortable girlfriend-boyfriend-like manner she could manage, and I stood there like a prop. I felt terrible for the guy at this point. A little while later, they were back at the bar. She called me over and started telling me about her ex, and how posting a picture to social media of her with an attractive guy would definitely make him jealous. The guy literally started crying and walked back to the bathroom. I walked away to talk to my bouncer just to let him know what was going on in case things got out of hand. The guy came out of the bathroom sobbing, doing his best to hide it. She saw him and realized he was upset but seemed to have no idea why. She asked if he wanted to leave. He nodded. As they were getting their coats on, she looked at me and asked what time I got off and if I had a napkin and a pen. I was shocked. I said I'd be late and had to study. She grabbed a pen and napkin from the customers next to her and left her number with a heart anyway, all while this poor guy was standing there waiting for her. Then she pulled out her phone, opened Facebook, and started asking me to add her as a friend so she could tag me. I told her that given the situation and the fact that we had just met, I wasn't sure if that would be appropriate. She seemed not to hear me. She stood there for another couple of minutes, then showed me her phone, the picture of us, and her profile with a caption, "Upgraded," implying that she and I were dating and I was a step up from her ex. She showed it to the poor guy and asked if he thought we looked cute in the picture. The guy was holding back tears as best as he could. I told her that I thought the picture was inappropriate and misleading and that it would be best if she took it down. She flipped out and immediately started yelling at me from across the bar. The guy was literally sobbing in the bar top at this point, while his date was 2 feet away from him. A bouncer came and took her outside, putting her in a cab. I apologized repeatedly to the poor guy, picked up his tab, and gave him some free passes to skip the line on busier nights. He said he'd had a rough time lately and was hoping his 21st would be a change for the better. I can't imagine looking back on your 21st for the rest of your life and thinking of a night like that. I still don't know if the girl was a mean person or just incredibly oblivious. Probably a little of both. That poor guy didn't deserve any of that drama on his 21st. By the way, if you're finding this story as wild as I am, remember to hit that subscribe button and give the post a thumbs up for more content like this. Story 5. I used to work as a barman in a pub in Hertfordshire. So this Indian guy's at the bar telling me how he's meeting his date for the first time and that she's also bringing her parents. Possibly some tradition. Anyway, I'm chatting to him as he's waiting for the girl and her family to arrive. After about 10 minutes or so, they do arrive and are all seated at a table nearby the bar. I noticed throughout the evening how much he's seemingly making the family laugh and how well they seem to be getting along. Now the fun begins. After dessert, the mother and father of the girl go to the garden outside, leaving the couple alone. After a moment or two, the man comes up to the bar and, with a cheeky smile on his face, asks to pay the bill. Without hesitation, I process the transaction and congratulate him on how well his date appeared to go. He returns to his table and takes a seat. The girl's parents now return from the garden with glowing smiles and rejoin the table. I notice again how they all appear to be chatting and laughing until, suddenly, The man shows the receipt for the meal. The mood changes instantly. The glowing smiles are replaced with frowns. The girl's father stands up and says, "How dare you disrespect my family like this?" The man then apologizes in silence to the father, to which he replies, "You will never see my daughter again." Following this, the father picks up his coat and turns to leave, demanding his wife and daughter to leave with him. The wife stands up and immediately follows him out of the door. The girl hesitates, half rising from her chair, and then decides to remain with the man, where she now bursts into tears. The man was clearly overwhelmed with embarrassment and shock, not knowing what to do or how to react, so he proceeded to pat her on the top of her head. After around half an hour or so of her crying, she eventually stops and decides to call a taxi to go home, explaining, "I'm sorry, but I have to go with my family." The man, clearly disheartened at this point, reluctantly agrees and calls a cab for her. Now fast forward about 3 hours to when I finish my shift. I leave the pub and walk to my car in the car park. At this point, I notice a dark figure sitting on a bench near my car. I felt nervous trying to figure out the person sitting in front of me. Only when I'm around 10 meters away do I notice it's the man from the date. He was bawling his eyes out. Turns out his date was now locked out of her house for the night, as the parents were clearly distraught with her. And when the parents had left, they had ruined the poor guy's tires so he couldn't even drive home. Talk about a day gone wrong. All over paying the bill. Story 6. I work at a nice Italian restaurant that gets busy. One night, a man I wasn't even serving approached me while I was entering an order in the computer. He handed me $20 and a napkin with a phone number on it. He said, "I'm on the worst date ever. This woman is awful, and I need to get out. Take this $20 and find a phone and call me. Tell me you have to come home immediately. Any excuse will do. I just have to get out of here." At first, I thought he was joking. But 2 minutes later, his server came up to me and confirmed how difficult the woman was and that he could see the man didn't want to be there. As soon as I could, I called him and told him my car had broken down and I needed a ride. I never spoke to the difficult woman directly. According to her server, she was just very rude and unpleasant. It remains one of my proudest moments as server. Story 7. My first job was as a waiter. There was an attractive young woman and an average-looking man. First off, these people were around 30, and I have no clue why they decided to go to Applebee's for dinner. The guy was wearing plaid sleeve pants and an oversized red zip-up Columbia jacket. The woman was dressed more nicely, but it was still casual. Everything went smoothly until it was time for entrees. The guy orders a large amount of ribs and denies the girl her original order of a house sirloin, which was only about $6, less than a fifth of his order. The man orders a $4 salad and water for her. The woman stops talking completely, while the man talks about some crazy party he went to. He gulps down a few strawberry quencher iced teas, says, "See you Friday, sweetheart," and leaves her with a bill. She said the guy seemed nice when they talked on Tinder, but was very uncomfortable with him in real life and afraid to say something. A coworker and I paid for her meal, and later she and that same coworker started dating. They're now engaged. Story 8. It was one of my first dates, and right from the start, things were awkward. I was a junior in high school, excited to take out a senior I'd been flirting with for months, but as soon as she got in the car, she got a call that changed everything. Her close friend had passed away from a brain aneurysm earlier that day. I offered to cancel our plans and take her home, but she insisted we go on. We ended up at a restaurant where she cried quietly at the table. I hardly spoke, just asking if she was okay now and then while she texted her friends or struggled to speak through her tears. The waiter noticed their situation and acted kindly. He served us quickly and discreetly, easing the tension. Story 9. Back in high school, my older sister, who was in college, took me to a concert one evening. We got there early and found seats behind a guy and a girl who were clearly on the first date. Their conversation started off okay, but soon turned awkward, like they didn't know what to say to each other. It got so bad that they started talking about the weather, of all things. It was pretty awkward to watch. Now, my sister and I, being the mischievous types, couldn't resist making fun of them quietly to each other. We started mimicking their awkward small talk, trying to hold back our giggles. After a few minutes of this, the guy must have sensed something because he turned halfway around, his face looking desperate. It was like he was silently pleading with us, "Please, don't make this any worse for me." Feeling a bit guilty, we stopped and just watched the concert quietly after that. A few weeks later, my sister came home excited from a party. She told me something that blew my mind. "Remember that guy who teased at the concert? Well, I just met him at the party, and guess what? We're going out on a date." And that's how it started. They ended up falling in love, getting married, and now they have 4 kids together. It goes to show you never know where a little awkwardness and teasing might lead you in life. I can't imagine how awkward it must have been for that guy. But hey, looks like they both inadvertently played matchmakers. That's the best How I Met Your Mother story I've ever heard. Story 10. I work at a country club that is steeped in old money. leveraging it to generate even more wealth. Membership fees here exceed the cost of a year at my university. To say money's not an issue would be an understatement. Recently, I was serving a young couple and the power dynamics were striking. She was the daughter of a board member and was known by all staff for her substantial club account. The gentleman, on the other hand, wasn't a member and looked very bit like a typical broke college student. He was dressed plainly but neatly, while she was impeccably dressed in the latest fashion. The date seemed to progress smoothly enough, with nothing out of the ordinary, until she quickly left the table before I had a chance to bring out the bill. I took the bill to the counter. It totaled well over $300 for food and drinks, all items she had insisted on ordering. 2 bottles of top-shelf wine and 2 steaks. When he slowly reached for his wallet and began tearing up, apologizing that he wouldn't be able to leave a tip, I was taken aback. I've never had a customer cry over not being able to tip before. He went on to explain that he was also a server and that she didn't know he wasn't wealthy. She left because he had mentioned his scholarship. It was heartbreaking. I kindly reminded him that at this country club, we only accept credit cards or charge to accounts, not cash. Thus, her father received a hefty bill, and rest assured, he left a generous tip in her name. It was incredibly satisfying. Last I heard, her father had removed her privileges. I can't help but smile at the life lessons she's learned, like the value of working for the things you want, including dates. What's something that happened in the first date that made you decide against a second date? I met a girl at a friend's party. They're both in her mid-20s. Ended up spending 3 hours talking, and she was so funny, charming, gorgeous, and carefree. I asked her out and got a wonderful, "I would love to," from her. I showed up about 4 days later at the restaurant she picked, one within walking distance of her place. She arrived about 5 minutes later. "Nice place," I say, as I get her chair for her. "Since it's so close, do you eat here often?" She scowls in response. "You know, you ask too many questions." I was floored. Everything continued downhill from there. Within about 20 minutes, she just got up and left. I felt as if she had failed to tell me the other night she had an evil twin and that's who showed up this evening. Later, when I ran into my buddy, I asked what the heck was up. "Oh yeah," he said. "She's a piece of work until she gets a few drinks in her. Then she's adorable." "Thanks. Thanks a lot, buddy." Bet she has a drinking problem. She probably feels crummy when she's sober. Story 2. I picked her up and she asked me if we could stop by her mom's house so she could run in and grab something. I said sure. Made the stop. She went inside. 5 minutes later, she comes out hustling towards the car with a car seat and her mom chasing after her, yelling. She opens the car door and throws the car seat, which I now see as a baby in it, and starts yelling at me to drive. I freaked and just turned my car off and took the keys out of the ignition. Her mom called the cops and they came and questioned all of us for a good while. Turns out she had lost custody due to misuse and was trying to use me as a way to get her kid back. We never made it to dinner and I just went home after the cops left. Story 3. Went to dinner with a girl who I'd been crushing on for quite some time. It seemed to be going well, and we ended up back at her place, watching a movie or something. Out of nowhere, her boyfriend, of whom I was not aware of, came back from out of town and stopped in unexpectedly. He and I had a super awkward conversation for a few minutes, then the two of them disappeared into another room for a minute or two. She came back and said something to the effect of, "I don't have a place for you, I'm sorry." I just kind of got in my car and drove home, with one of the strangest feelings that I'd ever felt. At some point, a few minutes into the journey, I couldn't contain myself and busted out laughing. Story 4. Nothing obvious or overt, but from the minute we sat down to eat, the hair on the back of my neck stood up and I felt unsafe. It was polite, listened, very polished, but I could not shake that feeling. I drove to the restaurant to meet, so he did not know where I lived. After dinner, he asked for another date, and I just said no. I don't think we're a good match. Gave him money to pay for my half, said goodbye when I got to the door, turned around and he was staring at me with an expression I never hoped to see again. I ran to my car, moved it to another spot and waited until he left before I left so he could not follow. Restaurant was on an isolated road, so that was safer than having him catch up to me. Found out about a year later he was sent to prison for crimes of 2 different women. It happened on first dates. Never used a dating site again. Story 5. I met this girl on the apps and we're talking and she invites me over hours after matching. All right, sure. Things are all right through text. Her mom is there and is messed up. She's at the table just mumbling and dozing off and asking me to mess stuff up. Then her sister and her BF are there and they're intoxicated and having a screaming match while we're all just talking and hanging out at the table. She seemed more normal than the other 3. And most of the time she's just talking about her daughter. And she's older and is complaining about how she lives in another state and she's never had custody of her and complaining how we lived in a screwed up state that always gave custody to the father. Which is a lie. I live in CO and I never met any divorced dads with full custody, unless the mom straight up left and even lived with my mom after my parents divorced, when I would have been better off with my dad. So I leave and she asks me about a second date and I tell her, sorry to be blunt, but that was a messy situation and I was very uncomfortable and I don't think we'll align. She goes off on me and how everyone has a crazy mom, it's normal, and how intoxicated people argue, it's what they do, and how I sound like CPS and that I was a weirdo, and started hurling insults at me and then said I should have disclosed my medical condition. I have no clue what she was talking about. It didn't need to be like that. I would have picked her up, taken her to dinner and a movie or a walk or literally anything, but no. She straight up told me to come to her house with her messed up mom, hammered sister, and be out with zero warning. Story 6. 2 times. Farmer dude, showing my age, added me in MySpace, chatting for a while. I can appreciate a country boy. Seemed pleasant. Wanted to meet at McDonald's. Cool. Not hard to please. Let's get some Big Macs and chat. We talked for about 10 minutes and clearly it wasn't going to work. It was almost completely silent. Wouldn't ask questions, wouldn't eat, just sat there. I told him it was nice to meet him, but I had to get home. Later that night, I got about 20 messages telling me how he was into stuff and wanted me to come over and pour that mac sauce all over him. Yeah, that's a block. Counting Crows, dude. Met the guy in a Counting Crows online forum. Again, showing my age. And he happened to live a half hour away. Cool. Let's grab drinks at local bar and see where he goes. I got there, couldn't find him anywhere. Figured I was stood up. Then the lights dimmed and he walked out on stage, hammered, slurring every other word, or proceeded to play Round Here and stopped halfway through to Wretch. Now I can never hear that song without laughing up. Story 7. While we were having lunch, we ran into some friend of hers I didn't know. He stopped to say hi and their short conversation somehow brought up that she owed the guy a meal because he'd paid for their last lunch together. So she offered to pay for his lunch to square it away and he agreed. He ordered something to go and they told the waitress she'd pay for it. They both said their goodbyes and the guy let us alone to go wait for his lunch at some other table. So far so good. Though their conversation was a bit strange, it did seem like it came up organically. It didn't needlessly drag on. The guy was nice at all times and also polite enough to make himself scarce as soon as possible, instead of inserting himself into our lunch date, with the excuse that he was waiting for his food. So, we continued our conversation and everything seemed fine, until sometime later after the friend had already left and it was time to settle our check, and I realized this girl obviously expected me to pay for the whole thing, including the lunch she offered to pay for her friend, as a way to pay him back for the favor he did her. Now, even if the friend hadn't ordered a pretty pricey meal that cost me more than the rest of her check put together, and he had done exactly that, it didn't sit well with me how she had shamelessly decided to pay him back with my money in what seemed like a deliberate scam. So I paid for the whole thing in order to avoid making a scene, but later brought it up and told her that it wasn't cool. She made it clear that she saw nothing wrong with it, and said I was being cheap and childish. So I thanked her for her honesty and told her we were done and I wasn't going to be calling her again. She tried to argue that I was overreacting, but I held firm and blocked her a couple of days later because she insisted on texting me to convince me that I was wrong and we should go out again. Some people really live in an alternate dimension. I was probably in on it. Story 8. It was my first date. I was a teenager, working as an office assistant's helper. The guy who was older also worked there. I don't remember what his job title was. He asked me to the drive-in movies. He came to the house and met my mom, did the whole song and danced to her about taking good care of me, getting me home on time, blah blah blah, all those things. I was still nervous though, so I arranged with 2 friends to go to the same movie in their car. My date didn't know. They parked 3 cars down from us. After we parked, the guy was telling me to relax, he just wanted company for the movie. He respected me. So I'm thinking, cool. The movie started, I don't think the opening credits had finished and he was all over me. It was like he grew 4 extra arms in seconds. I push him off me and say, "Dude?" He apologized and said he was sorry. He thought I'd like it and couldn't help himself because I was so cute. Whatever. I told him I didn't like it and to keep his hands to himself. I get maybe 2 drinks off my soda down and he tries again. Now I'm mad. I get out of the car, throw my drink at him, and walk off. I go to my friend's car and get in. The guy didn't see where I went because he was dealing with dripping soda on him in his car. Our friends and I left. The following Monday at work was really awkward and he avoided me like the plague. This is why to this day I've never again dated anyone I've worked with. Story 9. Went on a first date to an upscale restaurant and bar. We met at the bar first for a drink to get to know each other, and then I was going to suggest moving over to the restaurant and get a table. It was a fairly large place with a large bar area. During our drink, I kind of noticed that she was always looking across the bar at this older lady, and the older lady was looking back. It also appeared they were communicating with facial expressions. I wasn't sure, but it seemed very odd to me. After our drink, we moved to a small booth in the restaurant area to get some dinner. We were getting along great, but I kept noticing odd facial expressions on occasion from her. The place had mood lighting, so it was kind of dark, so I wasn't sure. After we finished our appetizer, I excused myself to go to the bathroom, which was behind me. I noticed that the older lady from across the bar was sitting at a small table behind us. She was trying to hide, but not doing such a great job. When I got back to the table, I asked her if she knows who the lady was, that I thought they were communicating. She confessed that the lady was her mother and that she always brought her on first dates so she could give her an opinion and rate her date. So far, I was doing well, and her mother thought it was great. I asked for the check, paid the tab, it includes drinks and dinner for her mother, and stopped my losses. On the way out, I told her to lose my number. Story 10. I lived in New York City and she lived in the suburbs. We decided on a small chain restaurant, 3 locations in the city, and I said that the one close to City Hall was the best location for me. She agreed to meet me there. I arrived at the restaurant early and waited until a few minutes after our meeting time, then gave her a call. She told me she had no idea where she was and needed directions. In an era of smartphones, this is a puzzling thing to say, but I gamely tried to help. It was really hard to get her to look at the street signs for some reason, but when she did, it was clear she was in Midtown, several miles away and nowhere near City Hall. I asked, "Didn't we plan to meet at the one near City Hall?" And she angrily answered that she didn't know where the City Hall was. Again, how's that even possible with a smartphone? And why agree to go to a place if you have no idea where it is? She said she wanted to take a cab to where I was and asked me to pay for it. I decided to agree to this to keep the peace, since she was pretty much freaking out on the phone by this point. She arrives, I treat her to dinner, then I take her to a cool late-night tea house. We walk along the river. I tried my best to make it a good experience, but all conversation fell flat. I finally asked her where she'd like me to walk her back for the night. I was expecting to take her to a subway station because her suburb is quickly reachable by commuter train at all hours. Nope, she needed me to walk her back to a parking garage back in Midtown, where she was when I'd called her at the start of the evening. I had no idea she'd driven to the city. People usually don't drive from her town because the train is so much easier and cheaper than paying for the manhand parking. Luckily, our nice walk along the river had gotten us halfway to the garage, so I offered to walk her the rest of the way, and she happily accepted. Here's where he goes from inexplicable to insane. When we got to the parking garage, she asked me when our next date would be. Trying to be polite, instead of immediately replying never, I said we could figure that out over the next few days. She immediately turned hostile and demanded to know why I wasn't agreeing to a date right away. What was wrong with her that made me not want one? I replied I wanted to think a little before making more plans. She drove away and I thought that was it. Oh boy. The next day around noon she texted me. Her. "You're supposed to text I had a nice time last night, the morning after a date." Me. I didn't realize that was a rule. Her. "It is. I can't believe how rude you are. You need to pay for my parking garage because you sent me to the wrong place." Me. I don't think so. I paid for the taxi, but that's all I'll be doing. I didn't know you were even driving and I told you which restaurant we were going to. If you didn't know where the City Hall was, you could have asked for a specific address. Her. "I'm going to tell employer how you treat people." Me. Reasonably? I then blocked her and I'm glad to say I never heard from her again. Not even from my employer. Story 11. I went on a date with a man who I'd previously met on a night out. He seemed nice, so I was looking forward to the evening. We went for a meal first, and as we were talking, I kept noticing he kept doing this weird shoulder twitch. I don't know if he was even aware he was doing it, but it quickly started to be annoying as I couldn't keep my eyes off his shoulder. He then started telling me a story of how he used to be in the army and his wife, who was also in the army, had been deprived of life. They had a child together and he had brought her up on his own. This was a horrific story and I sat in stunned silence as I just didn't know what to say other than I was sorry that it happened. After the meal, we went to have a drink in a pub across from the restaurant. He immediately picked out a bloke in a red top and started saying he shouldn't be around here because it wasn't his territory. He then pulled a knuckle duster out of his pocket and put it on his hand, all while staring at this bloke who was just having fun with his friends and hadn't once looked over. The red flags were literally in my face, so I made some excuses and left. I only dared tell him by text that I didn't want another date. Story 12. Really nice guy. We got along, talked on the phone for hours, had similar values, and decided to meet up for dinner at a pretty nice Italian place. He's pretty massively overweight, 400 plus. I'm fat too, mid-200s, so I didn't really care. He also tells me at some point during our phone calls that he's a diabetic, which I'm leery of in my late 20s, but we were getting along so well I thought it could be something I could be okay with. We sit down to dinner where he proceeds to order 3 cans of Coke for himself, the largest plate of food with extra sides. This was shocking to me because I'm actually really healthy for my weight, and it can be mostly attributed to childhood poverty and autoimmune disease. Like I'm fat, but I'm trying my best to be healthy. At perfect tests, go to the doctor regularly, work out a couple times a week, cook most of my meals at home from fresh ingredients, etc. My concerns with him stemmed from the lack of care for himself, and the possibility of needing to care for him long term if I continue to see him. I wanted a partner, not someone who wasn't making the changes after such a serious diagnosis as type 2 diabetes. I told him after that I wasn't feeling a connection, and honestly felt like I was betraying the fat community by rejecting him. My therapist heard a bunch about this, but I wasn't attracted to his lack of care for himself. Story 13. Back in college, a guy my sister's rat-fink boyfriend set me up with took me to the public library. I'm a good sport who likes to read, so that wasn't a deal breaker. What was the worst was stopping him off when he tried to mistreat me in the YA section. Listening to him brag about frisbee golf and then making me walk a mile from said library for Chinese. He ordered $60 worth of food I didn't want and had the gall to pretend to search for his wallet when he had a square wallet-shaped lump in the back pocket of his jeans. After admitting he wasn't going to pay for the food he ordered, he talked about all the activities we could do together in his dorm room. I didn't say anything. I just paid for the food and let him walk me to his dorm. When we got there, I said goodnight and left with the entire Santa sack of food. Had a good cry on the walk home once I was out of ear of his swearing. My sister and her boyfriend chewed me out for being a nightmare until I showed them my fridge full of egg rolls and explained that I hoped they liked Chinese, because my monthly food budget they mooched off of was spent. In defense of the Chinese place, they made excellent orange chicken, but that was by far the worst date I've ever had. I hope his frisbee melted in the sun. Story 14. My very first day was when I was super young. I don't even know why she said yes, but I had a crush on this girl for the longest time and everyone knew. Well, we picked a date and time and the plan was to go to the local pizza place and then watch a movie. I wish I remembered the movie because it would remind me exactly when this was, but I digress. So my lanky, stinky middle school self gets all dolled up and ready. My mom drove me to her place and I awkwardly waited around for her to get ready. It's then revealed to me that she's bringing a friend. We got into the car and made our way to the movies. The entire trip was super silent and awkward. My mom was the one trying to make small talk with everyone, and it was certainly not helping. She dropped us off at the pizza place, which was directly across the street from the theater. I ordered 2 pizzas, 2 large pizzas. I don't know how much these ladies can eat, okay? My brain hadn't, and feels like it still hasn't, developed, alright? So we got these 2 large pizzas, and I'm sitting across from 2 girls who are also very nervous and not the most social people. You'd think the third person would make it easier to have a conversation, but absolutely not for a bunch of teenagers. They each have 1 slice of pizza, and I tried to make up for the difference and ate like 4. We had to throw out some slices, and I wound up giving a whole pizza to these random people in the restaurant on our way out. I don't know what I would have done with a whole pizza before going into a movie theater. We went and watched the movie and still hadn't really spoken a whole lot at this point. When we got out, we waited around for my mom to pick us up. So what does the teenage brain think is the natural next step of our date? The kiss, of course. I hadn't asked my dad about this specific situation, but the conversation had come up a while before. I don't remember how it came up, but basically, I remembered my dad saying I should ask if I could kiss a girl before doing it. So back to our date. We were waiting around and had to find a way to make my move where it's just the 2 of us. At least I had the foresight not to do this in public. Anyways, we walked over to the town's covered bridge and I asked her if she was enjoying herself. She said yes, of course. And I leaned in and asked if I could kiss her. She was obviously super nervous and she just goes, "No, thank you." So I had to reverse the lean-in technique to make it look like I was just trying to reposition myself. I said okay, and we made our way back to the parking lot of the movie theater. The car ride home was exactly as awkward and silent as the ride there. We still acknowledged each other's existence at school, but whatever I thought I had for her in my little emo heart was completely replaced with, "Well, son, I think I'll hold off on the dating thing for the rest of my life." It'd be funny to hear her perspective now that we're older, but I left the whole thing thinking that dates weren't really my thing. It wasn't until I was older when a girl was into me and made it obvious that I even thought about being in a relationship. That one lasted 5 years, so I don't even know what the moral of my story is. Just laugh at my suffering, please. Yo, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 15. I matched with a girl on Tinder and we decided on drinks downtown and a walk around a popular park to chat. Last minute, she messaged me to meet her at her place instead of the restaurant that was like 3 minutes from my subway stop. Fine, You have to get off the subway and walk 20 minutes in the opposite direction of the restaurant, but I'm a nice guy, so whatever. I show up at her place and she invites me in as she needs to finish getting ready. I sit on the edge of her bed as she gets ready, and all I can hear is people having intimacy through the walls. She tells me it's her roommate and her new boyfriend, like it's totally casual. She then asked me if I wanted to compete with him to make her roommate jealous. I said no politely and said I was starving and wanted to go eat. I didn't tell her I wasn't expecting any action and didn't have protection. We walked to the restaurant and she proceeds to talk about all her exes and how they ruined their relationships. Whatever, I can deal with it. Who hasn't complained about an ex, right? So dinner actually went pretty well, mostly because I had a few drinks to relax and it was a chill restaurant. After dinner, she said she's tired and asked if I could walk her home. No problem. I already had a feeling this wasn't going anywhere, so I was excited to leave early. We get back to her place, and the roommate is in the kitchen getting drinks, and she straight up calls her names and tells her to stop messing with her ex so loudly in the next room while she's on a date. That's right. The roommate's boyfriend she was loudly doing earlier was the ex of the girl I was on a date with. The roommate then made a comment about how I'm next, and they started a screaming match. I told her I was going for a smoke so they could hash it out, and the second the door closed behind me, I basically jogged like 3 blocks toward the subway to get out of there. I texted her when I got home and said I had fun getting to know her, but was not interested as we didn't have much in common. No response. A week later, she sent me a photo and asked me to come over. I never thought I'd hear from her again, so I blocked her and that was it. Worst part is, the restaurant was a sick Mexican place that she said she frequented, so I never went back out of fear of running into her again. Lol. You should just go to the restaurant with a fake mustache and glasses on. Works every time. Story 16. A few of my favorite ones, from most recent to oldest. I don't really connect with animals. I don't want any pets, ever. Well, my profile has 2 cats and a dog on it, so this isn't going to work out. Not sure why she swiped right on me, or didn't notice when she asked what I was doing and I told her I was out walking the dog and we do an hour-long loop at the neighborhood every day. There was the one that had a profile of a physically fit attractive woman my age, but the person that arrived was 15 years older and 150 pounds heavier. I decided to stay and not say anything about it because the texting conversation went well. But 5 minutes into the date, she had me with a series of slurs and opinions. And I only waited until she was done talking because the stuff she said was so unhinged and not based in reality that I needed to hear the end of the rant before I left. The only reason I stayed until the end of the rant was so that I could share with my friends later and laugh at her. I had some good times out of quoting her and laughing at how dumb she was. And finally, I asked one about what she does at her job because it sounds interesting. When the date was over, I hadn't said much of anything else. But I heard about her job, how she got into her job, her friends, her college experience, her high school experience, her family, her ex, her other ex, that car accident she got in when she was a teen, her 3 trips to Disney World, etc. Interestingly enough, she was upset I didn't talk more, and I thought, when? You didn't take a single breath for 45 minutes straight. When was I supposed to squeeze in a word or two? There was the one where she spent more time talking about Taylor Swift than anything else, and found a way to jam her into conversations where it didn't make sense. I figured she didn't want to date me. She wanted to date Taylor Swift, and got out of there. At this time, I had heard of exactly one Taylor Swift song, and had basically no idea that the girl who put out Shake It Off was anything more than a one sensation. Story 17. We agreed to meet at a beach bar. When I stepped out of my car, he basically ambushed me in the parking lot. His dating profile said he was 5'11". In reality, he was shorter than me. First red flag, if he lied about something so obvious, what else was he lying about? He also had an NBA sticker in his car, an affiliation he had not disclosed. I was already uncomfortable, but felt too awkward to turn around and leave. We got seated and ordered drinks. Then he began to interrogate me. When I say interrogation, I'm not kidding. Your dating profile said you work in animal care. So what specifically do you do in the animal care field? I was working at a dog daycare at the time. How many dogs are under your supervision? Only dogs? No other species? And how satisfied are you with this line of work? Do you plan to continue this as a career? Do you plan to go on to grad school? My answer, I don't know, maybe not. So you don't have any drive or ambition then? You feel you'd be competing with other students and they'd have an advantage over you? Do you like living here? What drew you to this place? How is this town any different than when you went to college? Answer, it's full of yuppies and old people, whereas Gainesville is a college town. So when you say yuppie, what is your definition of that term? When you say college town, what specifically do you mean by that? Have you ever been to Jacksonville or Tallahassee? How recently did you go there? What specifically did you do or see while you were there? I went to the zoo. So you like zoos then? Did you like Jacksonville? Answer, I don't know. So you hated it. Are you an only child? Any cousins? What do your parents do? Do they live in the area? Do you have a good relationship with them? Are they conservative? Do you consider yourself a conservative person? No. So you rebelled against your parents? Do you have any religious affiliation? What are your parents' religious affiliations? Regarding the bar band, how would you describe this type of music? What adjectives would you use to describe this music? Do you live in an apartment? Do you have any roommates? Just you and the dog? Are you training your dog to be a guard dog and hurt people? No. So he's docile then. This line of questioning creeped me out a little. How long have you lived in Florida? Have you ever been outside the state of Florida? What other states have you visited? Have you ever left the country? What other countries have you visited? Which one do you have the fondest memories of? Would you like to live there? Why? Just because of the scenery? How did you feel about the people? Did you interact with the locals? Have you ever been to New England? Is it on your list of places to go? No, not really. So you hate it then? You want to see it ruined? What? After nearly an hour of nonstop questions and my vague, non-committal answers, he finally started asking me what was wrong. Again, I really wanted to be honest, but I didn't have the courage to tell him to his face that he was an irritating D-bag. Finally, he said, "Come on, I'm just trying to get to know you, baby, and have a good time." That was it. Him calling me baby was the trigger that finally broke my awkwardness about walking out. I pretended to go to the bathroom and ditched him. Story 18. My profile was very upfront that I'm not interested in smokers or users. I have strong allergies to smoke and I'm in a field where I'm tested frequently. Matched with a girl. Meet her, she posed or shopped all of her photos to look tall and lean, but she's no taller than 5'2" and built. No big deal. I like all types, but that puts me off. We go to a restaurant where she explains that she was late because she recently totaled her car. Find out at the end that it was a DUI because she was a bartender. As though that's sound logic. She tells bartender stories such as almost getting arrested for carrying a hunting weapon while working, but that it was only for resin. Now she once crashed into a fire hydrant when driving home. Tells me up front that she lives with her crazy ex and that they share a bedroom. Then, while in the middle of a restaurant, she pulls out a hunting weapon and just silently sits on the table before pulling out one of those pens and going to town on it. She said she hoped I made exceptions and blew a smoke ring into my face in a way she thought was cool. At the end of the date, she puts me in a position to kiss me, probably the only way she could reach me. Then she walked off into the sunset after only letting me say about 12 words to her, lit a cigarette in her hand. I have not made any of this up. I stalked her on Instagram a few years ago and she's transitioned and in a poly group. Relationship? I don't know how to describe it. Of two other people. It sounds like a cartoon protagonist. The anti-hero type, which doesn't mesh well with the actual reality. Story 19. I met who I thought was a really great guy, online, and after texting each other for 2 weeks, we finally met in person. He picked me up, had an awesome time with him, and we decided to go back to his place. This is where the fun starts. As we're nearing his place, there's almost no one else on the road, and all of a sudden, this other car comes out of nowhere. Stops us off, and apparently everyone knew each other and had some kind of major beef with each other. He throws his car in park, breaks out the tire iron from his back seat. There's 3 guys trying to get at the guy I'm with. We go back to his house, and he immediately wakes up his parents, who come out. It's like 3 a.m. now. This is still our first date, so now I'm also meeting his whole family. Cops show up. They don't arrest him, but tell him he needs to come down to the station with his parents. There's a discussion amongst all of them. His dad agrees that he'll personally drive him to the police station after the swing through my date's clinic first, as soon as it opens, and then he drops my date off at the police department and drives me home. It was a very awkward car ride back with my date's father that I just met. Shortly after this, he put himself in rehab and would call me periodically while there, to apologize profusely for what happened that night and just talk as friends. And about a year later, we actually did start a relationship together, but it was ultimately short-lived because I had my own problems I was facing with, and he got me back into using. I ended it for good because I put myself through rehab too. I would periodically hear from him throughout the years because, despite everything, he was a good person who had issues. Last I heard, about 8 or so years ago, he went through a long-term residential treatment and successfully completed it. Got married and had a kid. I still, to this day, wish him well and hope he stays in the right track. And I'm still friends with his sister, too, but over Facebook because we live in a multitude of states away from each other now. A good time was had by all. Story 20. Was taking me skiing for the first time for our first date. He was pressuring me the whole way that I was going to go down Black Diamonds with him, which really scared me, as I'd never skied or snowboarded before in my life. While driving up to the mountain, we passed by some ice. He overcorrected and we went off the side of a cliff and got caught in some thick brush. I was suspended in the air by my seatbelt and we both carefully maneuvered out of the vehicle. We climbed back up to the road and a nice elderly couple called us a tow truck and took us back to their place for milk and cookies while we waited. They scolded him for driving too fast in the past and for overcorrecting and told us people passed away there every year. We didn't go skiing much, to my relief. And then he took me to McDonald's for dinner, which was sort of the last straw. This dude almost ended us and didn't even think to at least take us to a sit-down dinner somewhere. That was the defining moment when I decided to never go on a date with this guy again. He asked, and I kindly declined. He understood, I guess, as he never tried to talk to me again, really. Story 21. Met this very attractive woman at a Halloween party. She was dressed as Wonder Woman. This is 30 years ago or so, long before comic movies dominated everything. She had an incredible body and was super nice and seemed like a lot of fun. I suggested we get dinner sometime and she was very into the idea. I couldn't understand my good luck. I asked a couple of friends what her deal was and got, "She's just like that," kind of feedback. Okay, whatever. We went out to eat, went up to a bar, but she didn't have anything to drink. Still having a great time, and she asks if I want to come to her house. Yes, please. We drive a ways, and it's a house attached to an old motel that her parents owned. Kind of a neat, if a bit remote, spot. I figure I am in like Flynn. And she stops me on the porch before opening the door. She smiles and looks up at me, and I'm about to go in for the kiss, and she says, "This is where I first saw him." Very matter of fact. I was confused, so I just said, "Him?" "Yes, this is where I first saw Jesus." I actually laughed, thinking she's joking. She got serious and said, "You should come in and see for yourself." I went from thinking I'm about to make out with a very hot chick to leaving skid marks in the driveway in all of 30 seconds. Story 22. Set up a date at a local dive or alt-rock bar that I frequent. She was cute. We'd been talking about songs back and forth for days and had been making cute little playlists together. She shows up at the bar at 7 when we had agreed and is already buzzed. First red flag. But she was a cute redhead and the chemistry was there. I really enjoyed chatting with her, etc. Figured I'd see if she had just pre-gamed and was going to slow roll a drink or two through the evening. Proceeds to tear through an additional 4 drinks. Okay, I've known to do some heavy drinking in my day. My foie gras probably looks like a Brillo pad at this point. She's still fun. We're still talking and laughing. Cool. We close out her tab and head out to the parking lot. She starts getting quite flirty and handsy, talking about my place or hers. I have a rule. I've had it since I first started dating. Our first time together, at least, we should both be sober. I need to know there's enthusiastic consent, without it being the stuff talking, that they want me specifically, not just their hammered brain. I very gently told her, "Hey, I'd really kind of prefer it if our first time together we were both sober, you know?" She refuses to take no for an answer, keeps pushing it, gets angry, then speeds off in her car. That was, as they say, that. I did discover some cool new songs and artists because of her, so that was nice. Story 23. I picked her up and we went for a meal where she wouldn't stop talking, mainly about herself. I figured that she was just nervous and that's just how it manifested itself. Drove her home and she asked if I wanted to come inside. It wasn't late and I thought she would be more relaxed at home and it would make it easier to have a proper conversation. Once we were in her flat, there were a load of vivariums with a number of different lizards inside which she insisted on getting out to show me. Now, I like animals, and lizards are pretty cool, but I just wanted to chat and get to know her. Anyway, she got them out one by one and proceeds to kiss them and play with them whilst we attempted to talk. Eventually, I decided it was time to leave and said I should go. So she put the biggest lizard she had that she's been kissing and cuddling away and tried to grab me and move in for a kiss without even washing her hands or face. I had to basically dodge her and nope out of there pretty quickly. Decided on the way home that it probably wasn't going to work out. Story 24. Met some guy at a variety show I'd played. Didn't know him at all, really, but he seemed interesting. He invited me on a date to see his friend's comedy show. The whole time he was acting weirdly possessive of me, in a sort of gross flexing way, like, "Hey, guy friends, this is my date. I brought a pretty person who I have here to be on a date with. Check out my date." As if his friends wouldn't believe him if it wasn't weirdly obvious about it. He was putting his hand on my knee and keeping it there for a weirdly long time, and putting his arms around my waist, etc. It was generally not the right vibe for the atmosphere, nor was my body language indicating that I was enjoying any of it. Then during intermission, he literally grabbed me, pulled me around the corner, and started mistreating me. I just went with it because I was scared and didn't want to cause a scene. I couldn't pay attention to anything in the second act because I was too busy processing the fact that I was just mistreated in the hallway. After the show, we went to the bar next door with his friends, and I immediately texted a friend who I knew lived nearby. Asked her to walk up as if she ran into me by coincidence, but needed me to come with her to help with something. Can't even remember what excuse we managed to cobble together, but it worked for us enough to politely get out of there and never see him again. Story 25. The year after high school, my friend and his girlfriend decided to set me up on a blind date with one of her friends and do a double date as a group. Showed up, and it was clear she wasn't impressed by me. Who was overweight, 5'5", and wore glasses. Sure, I'm no Brad Pitt, but that didn't warrant her making some demeaning remarks and pointedly ignoring me the whole night. The irony was she wasn't exactly Angelina Jolie. She had some extra pounds herself, wore glasses, and was 5'7"-ish. Of course, she still wanted to take me home to bed because, as she told my buddy's girlfriend, he's maybe a 5 out of 10 and has no real future, so I won't date him. No, I did not go home with her. My friend apologized for weeks afterward, and his girlfriend stopped ties with her friend. Ended up running into the chick in town about 8 years later when I was back home visiting. I'd gotten in shape, had laser eye surgery, was advancing rapidly in my career, and dating a wonderful woman who I would later marry. My one-time date, on the other hand, looked exactly the same. Was bitter and working an unfulfilling job. What is the worst first date you have ever been on or seen? I'd forgotten about this one until I saw the thread title. This was several years ago, before everyone had cell phones and I didn't have one at the time. It would have made things tremendously easier. So this chick calls me up off a personal ad and we seem to get along. She's a little older than I am and the picture makes her look like a little bigger than I normally go for, but whatever. She seems cool. It's kind of weird she wants to pick me up rather than meeting somewhere, but whatever. Things happen. I should have stopped everything when a dingy old Honda Civic rolls up and someone who's not a little older, but a lot older and a lot heavier than I expected gets out. But I don't, because I was young and stupid and didn't want to offend her by doing the 180 back into my house when it's abundantly obvious that the picture was really out of date. So I get into the car, which is full of trash, and we sat out. She tells me she needs to swing by her place, and I say, sure, whatever. Her place is in the projects, and I don't mean the kind of rundown but still nice part of town. I mean the actual housing projects. She invites me inside, and I figure it's better than sitting in the car waiting to get robbed. So I join her inside, where I meet her boyfriend and kid, neither of whom she'd thought to mention before. Her boyfriend is remarkably laid back about me wandering in, apparently on a date with his girlfriend, and promptly offers me some of his stuff. Now, I'm not against doing substances, but I only do them when they come from sources I trust and when I'm around people I trust. So I decline, mainly because even with my experience, I can't identify the mounds of colorful pills and other stuff he's selecting from. Also for obvious reasons. Her kid, meanwhile, is toddling around oblivious while the girl does whatever it is she's doing in the bathroom. Dude drops his pills and we wind up watching The Simpsons like some weird extended family. It turns out that he didn't know exactly what he'd combined either, and he starts having a freak out, and since she's in the bathroom and the toddler is a toddler, guess who's stuck talking him down? Especially because he's talking about God talking to him, and God's telling him things that aren't exactly making me any more comfortable in this incredibly awkward situation. But I've done this before. I have a lot of hedonist friends, and staying calm and talking someone through a surprisingly hallucinogenic experience is something I'm comfortable with. At least compared to exiting stage right into the heart of the ghetto as it's getting dark or getting harmed if his trip takes a bad turn. She comes out sometime later to find him on the floor. She doesn't seem surprised by this at all, as if the whole evening is perfectly normal and it's common to find one's day walking one's boyfriend through a bad trip, and asks me if I'm ready to go. I ask if we should be concerned about leaving the guy there when he's got several hours to go and a kid around, but she shrugs and assures me everything will be fine. So we head to the car. She starts driving and we're discussing where to go for dinner. I know a really nice restaurant, which she says is too fancy. I know kind of a nice restaurant, but she doesn't like their food. I know a quirky hole in the wall that's kind of gross but has fantastic food, but she doesn't want to go that way. She suggests Taco Bell. I make a noise that's somewhere between, okay, and really, which she takes as agreement, and we go to Taco Bell. At this point, I'm just happy not to be in the projects, and so I make the best of it. Ordering a couple tacos and being the gentleman, I pay when she orders what seems to be half the menu. My chance comes when she disappears into the bathroom. Without even thinking about it, I'm gone. I'm out the door and halfway down the block before I even realize what I'm doing. And I see in the distance, back at the Taco Bell, she bursts out the door and looks around. Then starts shouting for me to come back. And then I see her get in the car. But she's not going home. Oh no, she's starting to look for me. This particular Taco Bell was on a main drag that backed up to kind of a residential neighborhood. So I wind up hiding behind hedges and shrubs as she patrols the streets looking for me. This goes on for 2 or 3 hours, with me skulking in the bushes as she circles the block and drives up and down the streets. I've dodged cops that were less determined. I managed to work my way back to the building, only to find her waiting in her car out front, but she didn't know about the back entrance, so I snuck in that way and left all my lights off, and locked and barricaded the door because, Jesus. The sight of someone strange lurking in the parking lot at that late hour prompts one of the neighbors to call the cops. She refuses to leave. She calls the cops a number of interesting names, judging by the screaming I hear from the parking lot, especially when they decided to take her in for disturbing the peace. And she took a swing at one of them, adding a resisting arrest charge to her collection. The next, and only time I see her, is in the newspaper the next day in the police blotter. The icing on the cake would have been if she called him to bail her out. Story 2. They said it was boneless. We were having a nice dinner of salmon and roast potatoes at a dining hall. As he starts talking about his day, I took a bite of salmon and felt a horrible pain slide down my throat and stop. Not knowing what that was, I tried drinking some water. Deep in my throat, it felt like I was being pricked, and every gulp only made it worse. I realized this must be that stupid thing my mother had always warned me about when eating fish, that you have to be careful of fish bones or it will get stuck in your throat. Well, damn. I spotted some potatoes on my plate and started shoveling them in my mouth, to knock the bone out or push it down or whatever, as the guy started telling me a joke. Well, the plan backfired, and once again, the pain became much, much worse. But now it felt like someone had driven a screwdriver into my throat and was occasionally shoving it in deeper. So the guy finishes his joke and pauses as he looks at me, awaiting laughter. I burst into tears. He says, "That bad, huh? I'm sorry. I've got other jokes." And I managed to whisper, my voice not working so well, that I have a fish bone stuck in my throat. He blinks. But it's boneless salmon. I didn't really know how to respond to this, so I just stared at him with tears running down my face. He goes, "So, do you want to leave? What do you want to do?" And I whisper that maybe if we just get more potatoes, it will go away, right? 3 plates of potatoes later, I have a fish bone still in my throat. And I'm bloated and never want to see a potato again in my life. This guy just watched in confused silence while I ate potatoes and cried. When I look up, he asks if it's still there. I nod and we decide to go back to my room. As we pass by the salmon station in the dining hall, he points at the sign. "See? It's boneless." I didn't respond. When we got to my room, I called my mom and she said I needed to go to the hospital to have it removed. Freaking out, I turned to go and he insisted on coming with me to make sure I'd be okay. Sweet, right? Well, once there, he wouldn't leave. We waited 6 hours before any doctor or nurse would even see me in the ER, which I didn't mind. Some lady came into the bathroom while I was there and suddenly red liquid was everywhere on the floor, running into my stall. People definitely had bigger problems than my not being able to eat a fish properly. When a doctor came, it was some practicing med student who, without looking, said that most people think the bone is still there when it's not. Salmon bones don't show up in x-rays, so he told me to go home. I refused, having just had the bone partially dislodged then relodged. He said too bad and went to get me checkout forms. Well, the resident doc came and reamed the student guy out, and I'm thinking, oh, thank God, they're actually going to fix me now. Well, he told the student, no, we won't release her until we're sure it's really gone. Okay, really scary, but okay, they're going to fix it. So the doctor takes me into this room and the student comes trooping in after him. He brings in this weird boxy thing with a long cord, as thick as your average electrical cord, with a slightly larger thing on one end. He tells me that luckily for me, there's this new technology that can pick up salmon bones, and all they have to do is stick this cord. I was not a fan of this idea. Worse, he said he didn't have time to do this, and it would be good practice for the med student to try it his first time. Worse still, all the med students and nurses in this ward come trooping in to see this new technology. And worse, even more, the med kid is now nervous, and his hands are shaking. So they spray some numbing stuff into my nose. Most of it missed and just got on my nose. And then this kid with shaking hands tries to stick an electrical cord or camera down my nose while 15 people watch. So I, who had managed to toughen up and stop crying hours ago, felt an electrical cord thing go into my nose and then came pain. Med student. There's resistance. Nurse. Well, that shouldn't be. Just keep pushing. At this point, I have an electrical cord up my nose that's too big to fit, but the guy's jamming it in anyway. Yeah, I start crying again. Not sobbing or anything, just tears rolling down my cheeks out of sheer pain. This apparently freaked this kid out more and the shaking got worse. I didn't need to see it, I could feel it in my nose. So the camera or cord finally goes in and the kid looks through and can see the bone. Kid. Uh-oh, it's right there, in her vocal cords. That can mean serious damage. So he takes it out and the docs arrange for an ear, nose, and throat doc to come the next morning to remove it. But they say they cannot do it themselves because they may permanently damage my vocal cords. Awesome. Here's the best part. The 15 folks watching the camera or cord procedure all wanted a turn. The resident doc came in and told me how important it is that people get experience and how if they don't get it, they could end up doing things slowly or poorly on people who could pass away at any second. So I felt bad and gave them permission. All 15 of them. To practice with the camera cord thing on me. This was an hour-and-a-half ordeal of them sticking things in my nose and me crying and them pulling it out again and lecturing each other on technique and such. So this entire time, the poor guy I was on a date with is sitting in the waiting room. Has been about 8 hours now. It's a school night and it's 3 a.m. A nurse comes in and gives me a pill and says it will relax me before this operation will numb the throat stuff. And she says it may make me gassy. This is about when the nurses realized they had someone waiting for me in the waiting room and told him he could come back and visit me. Yeah, well, I was numbed up and not aware of much and gassy. Awesome. The next morning, they put me under, got the bone out, and sent me on my way. At classes in the afternoon, I had a spontaneous nose emergency that was pretty bad. I tried to cover it up with tissues until the person next to me turned, saw a ton of tissues, and their eyes got really wide. I left. The guy texted me several days later and kindly asked if I wanted to try redoing our first date. I told him I'd be happy to. Man, the guy must really be something if a date with him almost leaves you literally speechless. Story 3. I convinced a girl who I was crazy about to go out on a date with me, and I knew I had to make it count. We lived by the ocean, and she had dropped the hint that she had never been out on the pier at our local beach. Challenge accepted. I nervously drove her down to the beach, and we proceeded to slowly walk out on the pier together, though she seemed hesitant from the beginning. We stopped short of the end, and I leaned against the railing over the water while she stood back a bit from the edge. She didn't really seem into it at all. Awkwardly, I said, "This is a great view, huh?" Just as 2 pigeons flew up and landed at our feet. Sweet, chicks dig birds, I thought to myself. To my horror, the birds began to make passionate pigeon love in front of us while neither of us spoke. I had never witnessed such passion. I quickly scanned around and saw a couple holding roses on the other side of the pier. Awesome, they look romantic. Chicks dig romance, I thought to myself. We quickly walked away from the pigeon and stood next to the happy couple. The man and woman were holding each other and both holding roses, but something seemed off. I glanced up and noticed that both were sobbing. The girl I was with noticed too. As we were both looking, the couple took the roses and cast them into the sea. I had posted us up next to a funeral, some kind of sea burial. Between animal lovemaking and funeral, I'd executed one of the worst dates of all time. Just as I had accepted my failure, my date started getting fidgety. Based on her body language and her expression, it dawned that she hadn't told me about the pier as a hint, but because she was terrified of it. Turns out she had a fear of heights in the ocean. That pier will forever be a monument to my most unsuccessful first date. Story 4. I met a girl on OkCupid. She seemed pretty down to earth and we had a lot in common. We chatted for several days through IM and emails, and I asked her if she would like to meet up and get dinner. She agreed, and all of a sudden she turned into Captain Needy Pants. The 2 days leading up to the date should have been my automatic red flag. She texted me constantly and would say things like, "I can't wait to see you." At first I thought it was cute, but after like 5 texts in one day saying the same thing, I thought she was getting a little out of control. I almost canceled the date because I was getting such mega creeper vibes, but I decided not to. She shows up at the place we agreed to meet up at, and she looks way hotter than her pictures. She's gorgeous. She might have been one of the most attractive girls I've been out with. The date starts off pretty good, and we're having a good conversation. We start thinking, maybe she was just genuinely excited to meet me. And then, about 25 minutes into the date, she reintroduces the crazy side of herself. The first thing she said was, "So, what are you doing tomorrow night?" And I was not sure how she meant it, so I laughed and said, "I'm sorry, I have plans tomorrow night." Well, this apparently was the wrong answer. She slams down her fork and she says, "You're going out with some other woman tomorrow, aren't you?" I wasn't even sure what to say, so I squinted my eyes a little and leaned my ear towards her and said, "Excuse me?" The next 5 minutes are still a mystery to me of what actually happened, but she went on a rant. At almost a yelling volume, she proceeded to chew me out about how I was a horrible boyfriend and how all she wanted in life was for me to love her. I finally was able to get a word in edgewise and said, "I am not your boyfriend. This is a first date. What in the world is wrong with you?" I get the bill from the waiter, just hand him $60 and start to leave. She follows me out and tries to stop me, and I'm like, "I'm sorry, but I need to go." She starts crying and she grabs my arm and will not let go. And at some point, she's actually on the ground with a tight grip around my leg, begging me to give her another chance. I finally break free and get to the parking deck and drive away. She's standing at the exit to the deck with tears streaming down her face, and she's screaming something at me. I rolled up all the windows so I couldn't hear her. I drove away and was so thankful that day was over. She continued to blow up my phone for the next week and a half. On the following day, I had almost 30 missed calls from her and over 50 text messages. I finally had the number blocked by Verizon and the drama stopped. I'm totally thankful she didn't know where I lived because I'm sure she would have stalked me. Story 5. Blind date, arranged by a mutual friend. I get there, she's already eating appetizers. I'm 10 minutes early. Then she orders the most expensive dinner on the menu and tells me she did it because she knows I'm paying. Small talk fails, and for 45 minutes she complains about how no one is refilling her wine glass. She finishes the glass every 20 seconds. She mentions how she was told that I make a decent salary multiple times. I try to be civil and change the subject. Awkward conversation topics ensue. Nothing even close to first date etiquette follows. 3/4 of the way through, I go to the bathroom and our waiter walks by. Asks me for doing a reality show or something along those lines, since he has seen this disaster in motion. We talked about how wild this woman is for about 5 minutes, and then I asked him to stop at our table and ask about the bill. I immediately say split checks and give him $80, roughly $40 for my bill and $40 for his tip. The date looked shocked and ended up not being able to pay her bill, so the friend who put us up got a call and flipped the rest of her check. Her total came to be about $75. Last blind date ever. Story 6. I went to college at Creighton in Omaha, Nebraska. This was nice because it was near an airfield, so even insecure, slightly chubby women like myself had a chance at a date. I met an Air Force guy with all-American blue-collar looks at a bar called Guitars and Cadillacs. That should have been my first clue, yeah? So, on a Saturday, Airman Joe or whatever says he'll pick me up from my dorm at 7. I got a call at 7:30 from him saying that while he was at the gas station, some lady bumped into his car and somehow shattered the window of his 1994 Camaro. Warning, warning. So he goes back to the base to pick up his friend's car, a Plymouth K car with plastic for the passenger side window. We went to a movie. We got a Taco Bell for dinner. Mind you, I am not particular about big money dates, but when the conversation is waning between discussing the movie Face Off and a person's favorite drink, they start to get fidgety. After Taco Bell, he's driving me back to the dorm when he pulls over into a gravel parking lot, puts the car in park, and grabs me for the worst, most intrusive kiss I've ever experienced. Of course, my head has been pushed back onto the plastic framing the window, and I've used enough force to back away from this that my head pops through the plastic sheeting. "Yeah," I say. "What are you doing?" "I thought you'd be into it," he says. I say, I think you better just take me back home. Get me back to the dorm right now, please." The nice thing was that the wind blowing through the plastic sheeting made it nearly impossible to have a conversation on the way home, and this would be my worst date ever. Story 7. I met up with a girl I had chatted with online a bunch of times. I live in Toronto, but was visiting her city, Midwest US, on business. The date was going great. We ate dinner, then we went out for some drinks. She had one drink and collapsed. She eventually got back up. We sat her down. She seemed like she was incredibly intoxicated, but she had only had one drink. No one came out and said it, but I could tell everyone in the bar thought I did something to her. I grabbed her phone, called one of her friends, told them to come pick her up because she's sloppy. I'm on a first date with her name, and she collapsed. I think someone might have spiked her drink. Not exactly the best situation for me to be in, as this is our first date and all. Her friend said, "Not again." "What do you mean, not again?" "Last month she took some because she wanted to set up the guy she was with. He was really rich or something. It was on speakerphone. Felt good, man." I will never forget how people's attitudes changed towards me after that. People who were talking to each other about how I'm going to take this girl instantly apologized and tried to help me get out of that situation. Someone eventually called an ambulance. She was unemployed at the time, so I'm guessing she got a nice bill in the mail. Yep, she definitely sure did. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 8. Unless someone passed away in a date, hey, who knows, I do believe I have the worst date ever. I mean, ever. So I'm newly single from a bad breakup of 5 years. She leaves me for another gal and her friend decides to right her wrong and rob me of everything I own, save for my dog, bed, and some of my clothes. Anyways, so I'm a few months along and try a dating website, Yahoo Personals. A gal messages me. She's Hispanic. I'm white, I don't discriminate. And I'm like, all right, your picture looks okay. You type a little innocently, immature, but text is sterile. I give her a chance and we meet a bit south of me in a mall. It's public. They have restaurants. If things don't work out well, that's fine. We can go our separate ways. So I got there and she messages me where she is in the mall and I see a gal, but it doesn't look much of anything like the gal I've been talking to. Sorta, but like her uglier sister. Well, it's her. She photoshopped her pictures. A lot. Her smooth face in the pictures? Nah, moles all over. I'm not talking 1 to 2, I mean like dozens. All over her face. It's so strange and repulsive. Most guys would be like, "I'm out, bro," but I don't want to hurt her feelings. I figure I'll chat, see what's up. I introduce myself to her. She says hi and we walk through the mall. I notice a few minutes later someone is following us, shop to shop. "Oh, that's my mom," she says. It bothers me a bit and I ask, "Why is her mom here?" By the way, we're both 25 plus. She explains her mom came along for the meet with her brother-in-law and his wife. Pregnant, by the way, 8 months along. The gal keeps trying to kiss me in every store, but her mom is literally in the other aisle giving me the eye. It was so creepy, not in a good way. So we, after an hour, go to the food court and get some food with the entire family. They seem nice, but it's just too creepy. They invited me back to their place for cards and family games. They want me back at their place to grill me about their daughter. Not good for me. My stomach starts acting up as we're finishing up dinner, but it's not feeling like my stomach, like a weird diarrheal feeling. I excuse myself to the bathroom, where the feeling of needing to go intensifies quickly. I enter the bathroom, downing a medicine as I enter. I'm sweating and I do not feel good at all. I saddle up to the toilet. Not much, and the feeling moves into my kidneys. It's all fast. I'm sweating. I don't feel good at all. It's not food poisoning. My stomach is fine, but I feel like I have a thing moving from my kidneys to my jimmy. I'm not liking this at all, and it's getting bad. I see her outside the bathroom, and she says her family has gone to meet us nearby for me to follow them to their house, but we're parked at different areas of the mall, so we're to meet up at a nearby Denny's. While driving there, my jimmy feels like it's on fire. The pain is so intense, I'm afraid I've broken something and don't know what, or how. We get to the Denny's parking lot and I bust inside. Customers only, the sign says, but I don't care. I get into the bathroom, pull up to the bathroom. I actually briefly pass out for a second. I catch myself falling against the wall in pain, but nothing comes out. I zip up and stumble outside. My ugly date is standing next to my car and the world goes gray. Such a weird feeling. I fall into the grass on my knees. The pain is so intense I'm half a second from passing out. I try to mumble something to her about being in mortal pain, that I might need to go to the doctor. And there she is, 1/2 inch from my face, hairy moles all over her face. I wanted to retch, but I'm in so much pain and she closes her eyes and moves in a bit further for a kiss. A kiss! While I'm passing out in the pain. I push her away and stumble to my car and manage to peel out. I'm not sure how I made it to the highway. Should have gone to the hospital. I don't even know how I managed much of anything. Once I got back to my apartment about an hour later, the pain was gone. Just a little pebble in the toilet. Story 9. I met up with a girl who I had met through a mutual friend. The first time we hung out, there were the 3 of us at a football game. She bought the tickets and they had an extra. The talk turned to grad school and I joked that I was only there to meet a wife. She laughed and said, "The only reason I'm in town is to find a husband." Then she says, "We should just get married and start doing what we want to do in life." This sort of joking continues throughout the game and I leave. A couple weeks later, she's back in town and asks to hang out. I met her at a bar and we seem to get along really well again. She asks me to go back to her friends with her. Things start getting heavy and we begin to have intimacy. I ask her if she's on birth control. She says she's not. I ask if she has protection. She says she doesn't. I tell her that there's a pharmacy a block away and I'll just go run and get a package and be right back. She tells me not to bother. I start to remember our previous conversations. I stand up and say, "No offense, but I really don't want a kid right now. And I'm firmly opposed to relying on morning after pills or other methods for birth control. I'm going to get some protection." She tells me not to bother coming back. Now I'm wondering if she was insulted or if there's something else going on. I go home and chalk it up to all the bad karma I gave myself in college. 4 months later, I see on Facebook that she's engaged to an attorney. Story 10. My worst day was way back in 6th grade. Even though girls I thought was cute then, which I actually didn't know until late high school, I was a super shy, geeky kid who played tons of computer games and Legos. But late one night, after a school dance where I slow danced with one of the most popular girls, her friend called me up. In the most typically cute middle school awkward conversations between the girl's friend and the girl, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. So we set up a first couples date that next Friday to go to the park, maybe the mall, etc. At that time, I started playing the PC game Mech Warriors 4, so I was obsessed with Mech Warriors. I loved them so much that I poorly drew battle mechs all the time. So, being the cute but shy and totally inexperienced kid, I had the bright idea of spending the day drawing battle mechs at the park. I showed her my pictures of a Mad Cat Mark II, what a Gauss cannon looks like and how it works, just the nerdiest 6th grader thing you could possibly think of. For 2 hours, I basically forced the poor girl to try and make up the best battle mech with the best weapons. And though she was trying to get us to go to the mall, I wanted to show off my drawing skills and my knowledge of Mech Warrior. During the date, I thought I was the hottest thing in the world. The date ended with her making an excuse to leave and me thinking, nailed it. The next day, I was met with awkward looks and stares. And finally, a classmate told me that the girl I took on the date thought I was a creeper nerd and I was made fun of for the rest of the year as an unpopular geek who was obsessed with robots. There wasn't even an official breakup either. Though, on a happy note, I learned how to break dance over that summer and became the most popular guy in school for all of 7th grade. Middle school. You should call her up sometime and remind her that they're still going out. Story 11. Dating this girl who I later realized was pretty much using me to buy her stuff. I took her out to dinner and surprised her with concert tickets to Jerry Cantrell, of Alice in Chains. She was excited, but then proceeded to spend most of the rest of dinner on the phone telling her friends. Kinda rude, but no big deal. Fast forward to the night of the show. I take her to dinner and she acts icy cold, barely makes conversation, and shrugs me off every time I try to make conversation. Take the SkyTrain down to the venue, doesn't want me to touch her at all, pulls away at incidental contact even. We get to the venue, go inside, and I buy us a couple of drinks. She curtly thanks me for the drink and then says she'll be right back. I grab my drink and head to the stage where I see her talking to some other guy. It becomes very clear quite quickly that they're together, or at least have been before. So I walk up and say, "There you are. What's up?" She replies, "Oh, it's you. Hi, this is my friend." He gives me a nod and a look that pretty much says it all. They're together, and I've been played like a fiddle. So now I'm in this horrible situation. Jerry Cantrell goes on stage in 30 minutes, and I'm gonna have to either A, go home now, wallowing in misery, or B, stay and see the show, knowing this woman is enjoying it with her toy, less than 20 feet from me. So I do what any other Alice in Chains fan would do. I get hammered and sloppily dance or mosh for the next 2 hours, trying to ignore that stinging feeling every time I see her. The show was great, and the crowd was awesome, minus the two, so that was a plus. I went home as soon as Jerry left the stage, said "eat this" to the girl on the way out, and pretty much sobbed in the ride home. So pathetic. But at least I learned a lesson about how evil some girls can be. I learned to protect my heart more closely in the future. Worst date I've ever been on. Story 12. I'm not sure if this counts as a date or not, but after my roommates and I found a free kitty on Craigslist, we decided to adopt it. We went out to the guy's house and my roommate brought her BF. The guy giving away the cat was only doing so because he still lived with his dad. As an adult over 20, but his dad was getting remarried and the new wife was allergic to cats, so they made him give it away. This is all fine and good, but the creeper part comes in when he takes the cat, still in the cage, and proceeds to talk to it in an extremely high voice, telling it how much he loved it and would never forget it. This is also okay, a little strange, but okay. But then he proceeds to lament about how he's losing his only friend and about how he can never get a girlfriend and asks us about our relationship status. My roommate pipes up and says her BF is waiting in the car, but I'm more than single and also looking. At this point, the guy is like a falcon diving down on a mouse. He grabs my hand, kisses it in the most awkward way possible, and asks me out on a date. He also asks for my number and to keep him updated on his precious baby, about how he likes to draw on DeviantArt and about how his drawings are art and not traced. He gave me his account name and asked me to look him up, followed by asking for my phone number. I decide to give him the number. My friend, with a huge troll grin on her face, loads the cat into the car and we leave. He blows me a kiss as we leave. I looked up his account just for the lulz after a few days. It was full of poorly drawn Sonics, but also a new pic that had a depiction of a blue Sonic kissing a pink Sonic's hand. My friend then told me it was definitely a sure thing and that I should go for it. Never trust a free kitty on Craigslist. Story 13. Met a girl online. Yes, I know, but I had had relatively good experiences with this before. I was very much not in the mood for a serious thing at the time either. So I met this girl and her friend at some house which they were parked outside of. I walk up to the car and the girl looks slightly less attractive than the 2 pictures she had up. Only 2 pics in her profile and both from the same angle. Normally a red flag, but who cares? I took a chance. But she doesn't seem terrible at first. So we go to a grocery store because her friend needs something. As soon as I get out of my car, her friend hits me up for gas money. I'm like, what? I kind of shrug it off anyway. Maybe your friend is just crazy. The girl I'm supposed to be seeing gets out of the car and is a good 15 pounds heavier than she appeared to be. She's wearing pants that my grandpa would have worn when he was alive and a 2 sizes too small Mighty Morphin Power Rangers jacket. At this point, I'm starting to prepare for an emergency evac as this is going downhill fast. As we walk into the store, I'm getting sudden terrible whiffs of BO. I realize in horror that they're coming from her. Keep in mind, we're outside, the wind is blowing, all of her clothes are on, and I can still smell her funk. So now I know I need to bail. I feign interest in whatever the hell she was talking about while I figure out an escape route. As I actually make real eye contact with her for the first time, I realize she also has a lazy eye. So I go to the bathroom in the grocery store and call my friend. I tell him to call me in no less than 10 minutes and tell me I'm supposed to be at a party he's hosting within the hour because I promised I'd help set up. The stinky girl gets in my car and finally my phone rings. I play out the whole thing, yada yada yada. Oh, so sorry. I promised I'd be there, etc. So she asks if I can give her a ride to where she's staying. Gladly. So the whole drive there, she tells me this story about how she harmed a girl in high school because she dumped a good friend of hers or something. I was beginning to wonder if this girl was intentionally trying to make me as uncomfortable as humanly possible. Never again. Story 14. OkCupid date in the major metropolitan area. The young woman is 25, a college graduate, attractive in her photos, and apparently keen on getting together after a bit of correspondence. Super. We arranged to meet for sushi. She showed up, a good deal more portly and pimply than I had expected, with two of her friends, another couple, male and female, in tow. She explained, oh, they just wanted to come into the city with me. Within the first minute, the date was awkward and off-putting, but the friends quickly separated from us, and I figured things would at least progress pleasantly. As we walked toward the restaurant that we had agreed upon, she suggested going somewhere else. Fine, no big deal. We sat down, had our orders taken, and waited. Within 5 minutes, her two friends entered and took a nearby table. Bizarre, but whatever. Dinner conversation mostly consisted of her regurgitating marketing jargon while attempting to regale me with tales about working at an Apple store. I'm a political consultant by trade, so I wasn't exactly enthralled with the delicate science of being a floor salesperson for MacBooks. We finished eating and her friends joined us at our table. A female friend, who was absurdly more attractive and far less portly or pimply than my date, informed us that there was a shop she wanted to check out before leaving the city. I was invited to come along. It turns out to be a store that specializes in, let's just say, adult materials. For my part, I was wearing a Brooks Brothers button-up and a pair of khakis. After listening to the incredibly overweight female shopkeeper, my unattractive date, with whom I had never discussed intimacy and in whom I had no interest, inquired, so, are you into role-playing? At this point, I was thoroughly dissociated from the situation. I only managed to blurt out, do I look like I'm into role-playing? She didn't say much after that, save for a strange aside in which she commented, you don't look all that interested. The last guy I took here was so excited and was touching everything. Yep, evidently the store was a frequent early date destination. Eventually, I walked her and her friends back to her car and attempted to part gracefully with my traditional non-interested handshake. Don't I get a hug? So I awkwardly embraced the little troll, careful not to let her acne-scarred cheeks come into contact with my face. We said our goodbyes and that was it. Still kinda irked that I didn't get to see her friend try on a corset. Story 15. I brought a girl back to my house for dinner and a movie. I had previously made a bet with her wherein if she won, I'd make her dinner and bake pie. But if I won, she had to kiss me. Either way, win-win, right? So we finish dinner and go back into my bedroom to watch a movie. Midway through the flick, she says, I'm still a bit hungry. I think I'll go grab a quick bite of the leftovers. She gets up and goes into the kitchen. I decide about 45 seconds later as my stomach rumbles that this sounds like a great idea. I arrive in the kitchen to see her standing over my silverware drawer, emptying into her purse. I was shocked. I'd never had a date try to rob me before. I asked, what in the world are you doing? Her reply, oopsie. I'd have been angry already, but the girly giggling answer just put me over the edge. I walked up, looked in her bag, and saw that she'd only managed to grab some of the bad silverware so far. At that point, I reached over to the counter and grabbed a piece of the pie. I looked her in the eyes and said, don't forget your dessert. Then, while holding her gaze, I dropped the pie into her purse and smashed it up as best as I could with the sides of the purse to make sure it got there nice and good. Had her out. Never saw her again. Story 16. I've told this one before, but it is too good not to tell again. Met a girl via OkCupid. We chatted for about a week and then she asked me out. Nice, I thought. We made plans to go to dinner several days later. Day of the said dinner, she sends me a text saying, pick me up at 5 p.m., which was odd because she never mentioned needing a ride before, but okay, why not? Turns out that she lives 40 minutes away. I pull up at her place and she's outside smoking. Her profile said non-smoker and she never mentioned it before. It's getting dark and so I can't see her very well. I realized after she hugged me that she had some sort of goo, jelly, jam, cream, I don't know, on her face because now it had rubbed onto my cashmere sweater. We're in the car for no more than 2 minutes when, without asking, she starts fumbling with every AC, heat, and radio knob in the car. I'm just trying to turn up the volume, she said, as she worked the hot and cold slider back and forth. After about 10 seconds of whatever song happened to be on the radio at the time, she tells me my taste in music is horrible and tells me she's an amazing singer who will be a pro one day. Something else she hadn't mentioned. So I ask her to sing something. She gets very quiet and stares off for a while. About 5 minutes of silence passes before she says, want to hear me sing? I still don't understand what came next. She plugged her iPod into my car, put on some horrible kiddie pop music like Hannah Montana while singing. No, mumbling the words to the song so quietly that I couldn't hear her. After the song was over, she turned to me and said, "See, aren't I great?" I thought she was joking, so I just sort of snickered and nodded. She screamed, "Are you making fun of me?" and scared me. I carefully and fearfully shrank back and said, "No, sounds great." He got very happy again, saying, "Great, I knew you would love me," and then rambled incoherently for a few minutes. I zoned out because it's about this point when I realize she's crazy, and I start to freak out. She didn't smell of drink, so I'm wondering what she could possibly be on. I decide against the original restaurant plans, and my mind starts scrambling for locations that could take her that are cheaper, and I won't be recognized or bump into anyone because I can tell it will be a disaster. 10 minutes of silence passes. She turns to me and says, "You're a schmuck," and I just smile and nod. She goes on to ramble about nonsense for a while. Several more minutes of silence pass. She turns to me and says, "Are you taking me home?" We've been on the highway this whole time, and not going to pass up on this get-out-of-jail-free card, so I ask, "Do you want me to?" And she says, "I don't care," which I take as a yes. I turn around at the next exit, and at least another 20 minutes of her rambling to herself with long pauses go by. We go off at the highway at the exit near her house. It was about this time when she decided to unbuckle her seatbelt, reach over and start kissing my face. Not my neck, not my ear, my face. I froze in terror. This chick was crazy enough to grab the steering wheel and yank it, to put the car into neutral while driving. Who knows? I just say, "Please stop, that tickles," which apparently she takes as flirting and backs off, saying, "You're so sweet." Shiver. A few minutes later, we pull up in front of her house. She looks at me and says, "Wait, are you taking me home?" And I said, "You are home. Have a good night." Well braced for who knows what to happen, she quietly looked at me and said, "Really?" And I said, "Yep." She got out and left without another word. I go home and drink, trying to wipe the night from my memory. The next morning, I found her cell phone in my car. It's covered in the same slime she got in my sweater. Fortunately, I still had her text with her street address, so I put it into an envelope and mailed it back with no return address. What was the moment you realized that you shouldn't have showed up to a date? An alleged friend told me her coworker and I would be great together and wanted to do a double date at a festival with her and her husband. Date suggested he and I meet up the night before to get to know each other, and I suggested a gaming bar I'd wanted to try. Daytime arrives and he's not there. He finally shows up and tells me he had to stop home to let the dogs out so they don't mess all over the floor. Then proceeds to show me a picture of a floor covered in dog mess and says, "Guess it didn't work." He's still wearing his work clothes. It has been 3 hours since work ended and he went home to deal with the dogs but didn't change. He proceeds to eat the rest of the charcuterie plate I ordered by himself and then orders wings for himself. We decided to check out a game since I've now paid for more game time. He wants a Mall Madness game that is not designed for 2 people. We settled on a playable game. It's not great. As we were wrapping up, he tells me that the last date he took here did him in the parking lot. He stares at me expertly. I tell him that's not going to happen. I tell my friend I'm skipping the festival. He's shocked and thought we had a spark. Guess the only spark was the one he felt when he stepped into dog mess. Story 2. I didn't show up for this date, but was always super proud I trusted my intuition. Had a date scheduled with a guy at a nice place downtown that I had agreed to. Right before the date, he leaves me a message saying we're going to a different place. I look it up and it's a dive bar out in the middle of nowhere. Like in a field. Alarm bells started going off. I actually really liked the guy and went back and forth with myself because I called the guy back and got his voicemail. So I leave a message apologizing profusely, but I need to reschedule the date. And I'd like to pick the place this time. Alarm bells are still going off and I end up letting his return call go to voicemail. I'm glad I do because I had to listen to it twice to believe it. This grown man proceeds to scream at me, calling me every name in the book, calling me a witch, telling me how I missed out on the best date with the best guy of my life, and then proceeds to tell me how he would have made me feel good that very night. I hadn't even been remotely intimate with him, so the comment came completely out of left field. That was the most happy I'd been. I went with my gut and skipped out on a first date. Trusting her intuition saved her from a field trip to Creepy Town. Story 3. Matched her with a girl on POF. We were talking for a while, and she worked out she knew someone I had worked with in the past. I asked him what she was like, and he said she's okay and not mental or anything. Little did I know he really didn't like me because I was better at the job than he was, and it was straight up lying. So I arranged a coffee date between our houses. She only lived like 5 to 10 minutes away, and the nearest shopping center cafe was 10 minutes away. I arrive and wait a few minutes, and in walks this girl 10 to 15 kg heavier than her display picture with a baby in a pram. She recognized me and sat down like this was normal. The entire time we had been talking, she told me she had a daughter who was 2. I told her I had a 2-year-old son as well. Turns out her daughter was 2 months, not 2 years, and she never corrected the fact. Also, this is the first time we had met, and she asked me 5 minutes into the date if I could buy her baby formula. One look at her and I could tell she actually needed the formula and was in a desperate situation. So I bought it for her, because I didn't want her baby to starve. I politely told her it was never going to work because she straight up lied. She said, yeah, fair enough, and left. About 2 months later, I was talking to another girl in POF who happened to be friends with her. She seemed normal, and not like the complete psychopath I'm sure she was. The crazy one from the first part of the story rang me. She stalked me through my friends and told me how the second one was mental. I said I didn't believe her, and she hung up on me. 10 minutes later, my messenger starts going off. It's girl number 1 sending film clips and news articles of girl number 2 having a complete psychotic break and torching her ex-boyfriend's car, on camera in a shopping center. So it all worked out well, and it dodged the bigger problem because girl number 1 thought I was too nice a guy to deserve girl 2. Turns out buying a little baby formula goes a long way. Story 4. When he walked into the cafe we were meeting at with a 4L jug of water, plopped it on the counter and told the barista to use his special filtered water for the tea he was ordering. Turned out he sells these water purification machines that optimize the pH, which he insisted was not a pyramid scheme. It definitely was. After enduring his awful sales pitch, he also told me he used to be a dealer and that he turned to selling water because he's getting used to selling. He also told me how he had extremely old-fashioned values, his words, that he's a very controlling person and can't help it. He said he hates when people waste his time and is looking for a wife. Every time I tried talking about anything, he would cut me off and start talking about himself. He offered me a ride home at the end. I politely declined and ran the second that was no longer in line of sight. Story 5. I was using a dating app and this woman had messaged me first and we had a few great conversations. She was listed at 35. She suggested that we meet up, have a meal, and then see where things go. I show up to her place to pick her up, and as I'm waiting, a 65-year-old woman approaches my car. She introduces herself, and I ask her how old she is, and she says 35. I ask to see her ID. She declines, and she insists we go get a meal. I politely tell her that the start of any friendship or relationship needs honesty, and I would kindly like to know her age as it is obvious she's not 35. Keep saying she is 35. As we're driving, I'm going in circles under the pretext of going to a restaurant. I ask about her life, and she gets interrupted by a phone call she must take as it is from work. She asks for me to pull over to let her talk. I do. She doesn't exit the vehicle. I was very close to leaving on the side of the street. She works as a phone psychic, and I sit there listening to her, faking it to a lady who sounds like she's in need of help, explaining they pay $9.99 the first minute of which she makes $5 and $2 every minute of which she makes $1. After her call ends, she says, easy $12. So I resumed driving, now headed back to her place, which I didn't realize, and I continued asking her about herself. She drops that she has a son that's 31. I break as I start laughing and say, so you gave birth at 4? She starts mumbling about how she misspoke, but I pulled up in front of her building and politely asked her to exit the vehicle as dishonesty is a deal breaker. Story 6. Before our first ever date, which she told me he wanted to plan, I told him I had been vegetarian for a few years now, and as long as where we went had vegetarian options, I didn't mind where he was. He brought me to a steakhouse. Said he'd forgotten I'd said that. I ended up just having fries the whole night. Points to him, he did seem like he had actually forgotten, and the conversation was good, so I agreed to a second date. Now I had also told him I was caffeine intolerant. Couldn't have any coffee, Coke, most teas, etc. And where did we go? To the university coffee stand. I left to go to my archaeology class, and my desk buddy told me we're getting a new tutor, because her first one got sick and couldn't see the rest of the semester through. Guess who our new tutor was? Mr. Steakhouse and Coffee Stand guy. I maintain to this day that it was worth it all just for the look on his face when he walked into class. I wish I was making this up. Story 7. This happened to a friend of mine. Had recently broken up with a long-term girl and was looking to get back out there, but was too cheap to pay for a dating service, so stuck to free ones. He sets up a date with a girl to come over to his place and do some hot tubbing. She shows up and wants some specific kind of drink. I'll say Goldschlager, which she didn't have, so she insists they make a store run. She seemed sketchy, so my buddy is about 50% sure he's going to get robbed, so he tells her to drive and deliberately forgets his wallet and phone at home. When he gets in the car, there's no passenger seat. She said she has a huge dog, so she took the seat out. get to sit in the back seat. The date was late, so the closest store was closed. Rather than go back to his place, she says she knows a store that's open late. He says they're all state stores. They all close at the same time. She won't listen and they hit the highway. After a while, he starts to wonder where they're going and says, "Where's the store?" And she screams. She had forgotten he was in the car because he was in the back seat. My buddy now accepts that she's already intoxicated. She won't stop or pull over to let him drive, just keeps driving. Turns out the late store is about 30 minutes from his house, and she forgets he was in the car twice more on the strip. They got to the store and it's closed, as expected. She gets out anyway and is doing the locked door thing and yelling, "Hello?" over and over. My buddy is out of the car watching this as she starts yelling at some sketchy-looking dudes drinking 40s in the parking lot. Starts with, "Why is this store closed?" and quickly escalates. My buddy takes this as opportunity and just walks away. Doesn't even look back. Now he finds himself a 30-minute drive from home with no wallet or cell phone because he was so smart. He eventually gets a convenience store clerk to take pity on him and he calls his brother to come pick him up. He said he was worried about the chick showing up at his house, but he never heard from her again. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 8. I met this guy on Tinder. He seemed really cool. We started texting for a month or so and later planned to meet at this tavern. It was hard trying to find him because the place was packed. When I do see him, I guess he's hammered. Lol. But he didn't seem completely out of it. He was functional. I tried to ask him questions and get to know him in this sort of loud and busy space the whole time, even though he's inches away from my face and he can't hear what I'm asking or saying. Mind you, he invited me to this place. I'd never gone there before. This was supposed to be our first date. He proceeded to buy me a drink and kept touching me in the backside, quite forcefully, to be honest. This is my first time meeting him. We get a drink and he asks me, "Do you want a drink?" I told him he just bought me one. He asks this question annoyingly over and over again as if he forgot he asks. This goes on for at least an hour. All the while I'm trying to kick it with him, play some outdoor bar games and such. And he's asking, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm on a date with you." Lol. He asks me this question over and over as well. I don't get how anyone is that incoherent. He wasn't that hammered. He couldn't have been. Even if he was, when we texted, he seemed fairly intelligible and kind. But the whole night, he probably only asked me 2 to 3 questions. The same ones, over and over. And he kept touching me on my backside. There was a point we were going to congregate with his friends, and I sort of lost him in the crowd and left. Very rude and weird. He had the nerve to call me and asked where I went. I told him I went home. He said he wanted to get to know me, and I was like, "Yeah, maybe another time." Like, dude, you had the whole night to try. Had no intent to make a real effort. I blocked him. She went on a date with an NPC. Story 9. Ooh, I have one. I was 18, and a girl sent me a private message in MSN saying she got my details from my mate and wanted to go on a date with me. I asked my mate, and he said she was hot. So after talking a bit, I agreed to a date. I'd seen a photo, and she was attractive. I turned up to the cafe for the date and was approached by some girl I'd never seen with a baby. She then told me she was the girl. Looked nothing like her photo. She explained she thought I'd never go for someone who looked like her. She was right. And she left her baby with me while she went to the toilet quickly. Alarm bells started to ring after 15 minutes. I asked a waitress to check on her. To my surprise, the waitress came back and said no one was in there. I looked around the cafe and she was gone. I hadn't noticed her leaving. I didn't have any of her contact details and smartphones were not a thing, so I didn't have internet access. I phoned my mate and got him to attempt to contact her in MSN. After telling him what happened, he was surprised and had no idea. Apparently, he also thought her pictures were the real her. Another 20 minutes went and I was scared, so I asked the waitress for help. Thankfully, she was able to help and called the police. They showed up and I explained what happened. I didn't know anything about this girl, so I couldn't really help them. They said if she contacted me, to get her to contact them. I left and walked towards my car. I went past another cafe about 6 shops down and there she was with a different guy. I went back to the police and got them to take her baby in while I watched through the window outside and waved when she looked up. Turns out I was the babysitter for her real date. Story 10. He told me to meet him at a bar, which turned out to be a hole in the wall in a mall. Literally just a bar. No food, just drinks. We were supposed to be having dinner. I'd put in some effort with a cute outfit, nice makeup, etc. He showed up in ratty old jeans and a paint-splattered hoodie. That was the moment that made me think, ooh, this is gonna be bad. But he'd already caught me. So we sat down and the bartender immediately put a pint glass tonic in front of him before even asking what he wanted. Clearly he was a regular. We tried to make small talk, but he was just so weird. He was cutting me off mid-sentence with random nonsense. Buddy hitting me in the arm and kept hurrying me to finish my drink so I could keep up with him. He was slamming these pints of tonic, one after the other. The bartender kept him coming. I finished my one light drink, paid for it, which offended him deeply, and got up to leave. He chugged his last drink, threw a $100 bill in the bar, and followed me into the parking lot. I tried to get away politely, and he interrupted with, "Come back to my place. I do it like a freight train." I stumbled over my, no thank you. And before I'd finished the sentence, he got in his car, started the engine, and screeched out of the parking lot, almost getting it onto two wheels in the turn. There were some interesting characters back in the early days of online dating. 2004 was like the Wild West. Story 11. I went on a date with this guy on Tinder. He was a coworker of one of my friends, so I figured he'd be alright. First date was decent enough, so we went on a second. This date was also going well until I mentioned his pentagram necklace, asking if he just liked the design or if he was pagan. Either did not wear this necklace to the first date or it had been under his shirt. He replied pagan, and I said how I found the pagan religion to be very interesting and was hoping to hear more about it. Oh boy, I wish I didn't. He'd been fairly shy up until that point. He did a complete 180 and started going on, very loudly in this fairly nice restaurant, about how his mother could physically heal people just with touch, and about how his friend was in the army and got shot in the leg but didn't feel any pain from it because my date had linked minds with him from across the world and took all the pain from him instead. I managed to get through the day when I got home. A message to say it wasn't working out, that I didn't feel any spark after 2 dates, and wished him well. He immediately blocked me. I then messaged my friend, who was his coworker, asking if the pagan talk was normal for him. Friend calls me to cry from laughter over the phone about how he and all the other coworkers knew he was crazy, but also knew he was harmless, so wanted to see how I'd react to him. It was a bit cruel on my friend's part to not warn me, especially since he knew I was going on these dates, but I definitely wasn't going on a third regardless. Story 12. One of my first attempts at online dating many years ago. The girl wasn't very bright, but she was really nice and absolutely beautiful, judging by the pictures she'd sent me. As a little background, she told me she was 5'2" and worked out, and had an average to slim body. I didn't think anything of her telling me her height because she asked me mine, and that's not always easily deduced from photos. But her telling me that she worked out and had an average or slim body was odd because that was clear from the photos. After a couple of weeks, we set a time and place to meet. I arrived at a park near a gazebo she said she would be at. I looked through my windshield, but all I saw was this really tall, obese woman wearing pajamas standing inside. She was easily 6'4" or 6'5", certainly taller than I was. Thought maybe she was late because clearly there was no 5'2" petite female inside, so I called her. Then I see the woman's flip phone light up and play a song I didn't recognize, and she answered. It was her. She said, "I see you." I immediately hung up and started walking towards my car. That was the moment I knew I'd wasted an hour of my time driving out to meet a stranger. I hit the lock before she could open the door and rolled down the window with a, "Do I know you?" She said something along the lines of, "Yeah, I'm a bit taller than I said." I apologized, said I had to go, and it pulled away. Tall, obese women have never been my type, but even if they were, starting out any relationship in an easily verified lie is a gigantic red flag. She texted me a minute or so later and told me it was messed up for me to make her get ready to go out just to leave her hanging. Her version of getting ready was putting on old, unwashed pajamas. I ended up hanging out with some friends I hadn't seen in years that happened to live 20 minutes away, so it wasn't a total loss. I dodged that nonetheless. Story 13. This would have been in late 2011, early 2012, when Plenty of Fish was still a popular online dating option. This would have been my second, and last, date from online dating. I chatted with this one woman for a few days. She had similar interests, and her picture made her seem pretty cute, so I was interested. The day before our date, she admitted the picture of her was actually her friend and sent me a pic of her from the bridge of her nose up. She had pretty eyes, and I understood the shyness of putting her actual picture out there, so I still went on the date. Her face was pear-shaped, to put it bluntly. She was kind of slim, but also chubby in places you don't really think of when you hear chubby. Anyways, we sat and had coffee, and she only wanted to rant about her mom and little brother and how unfair it is that she had to watch him the previous night. Considering our online convos were about video games, music, and TV shows we liked, this was a complete 180 for her. I tried steering the convo to anything else, but she persisted. We both would have been 21 at the time. I left and told her we weren't a good match. Then I deleted my profile later that night. What is the biggest failed date you have ever had? Last year, I decided to text a cute girl that I had class with the previous term to try to set up a date. And she responded with something like, "Sure, I was hoping I'd hear from you again." She said she's a good bowler, so we agreed on bowling. The day of the day rolled around the next week. She was sitting on the railing outside the bowling alley waiting. Then, when I got out of the car and smiled at her, she said, "Oh, hey, I wasn't expecting to see you here." I thought something might be up, but I couldn't think of a good response, so I acted like I wasn't expecting to see her either. I asked her if I should go inside and get a lane set up for us, and she said, "Yeah, sure, just hold on a bit. I asked another friend to meet me here." When I asked who it was, she told me that it was her friend that just so happened to have the same first name as me. I went inside and handed over some passes for free games, put on my shoes, then put our 3 names in the machine. I didn't want to just start without her, so after waiting for 10 minutes or so, I got a text from her saying, "Where are you? I really don't want to be stuck here with this guy I used to have class with." So I found out that my instincts were right. But as a bowler with free bowling passes that were about to expire, I wasn't about to just leave. I responded, "Sorry, family emergency. I can't make it." And a minute later, she came back inside and found me in whatever lane I was on. When I asked her about her friend, she told me that he wasn't coming. When I asked her if she was ready to start, she then told me, "I'll just watch. I don't really like to bowl. I only really came to watch my other friend. Supposedly he's a really good bowler." After that, I told her, "Well, if you're not going to bowl, there's not much of a point in staying. I was just going to practice for a match anyway." We said our goodbyes, and I never heard from her again. Well, that's one way to get a strikeout without even throwing a ball. Story 2. Okay, this is long, but I want to paint a picture here. The first date after the end of an LTR was with a guy from OkCupid. He seemed intelligent and sweet, so I agreed to go to a movie and then dinner with him. When I showed up at the theater, I looked around for the person I'd seen in the photos, but was quickly intercepted by a guy who was easily 350 plus pounds. You guessed it. It was him. He was wearing a t-shirt stained with food and with crumbs still around the collar, a t-shirt that wasn't large or long enough to cover the enormous belly that ballooned out over his too low on his hip shorts. His back was on display, even standing straight up, and he made no effort to fix this. I pride myself on not judging by appearances, especially because I'm not a small lady myself, but I wear clean clothes that fit me, and I expect the same of others. This guy was downright grotty. But I'm a nice person, so I swallowed my shock and smiled and went into the theater with him. He took up 2 theater seats for himself, despite the fact that his popcorn, and soon his fingers, were drenched in butter. He clearly wanted to hold my hand. I kept it conveniently out of reach. After the movie, we crossed the parking lot to Denny's. He ordered 2 entrees for himself, along with an appetizer of fried cheese, a good portion of which wound up dribbling onto his shirt. And he left one hand stretched across the table in a clear invitation for me to hold it. Still trying my very hardest not to be judgmental, I engaged him in conversation. It was actually fairly well spoken, but when we got onto the topic of social equality, he burned his last chance to prove himself a decent human being by saying, "Non-straight people can do whatever they want in their own houses. If they ever step foot on my property, I'm gonna fire those quicker than they can run." I drove him back to his car, across the large parking lot, and waited for him to get out. He didn't. He ignored my claims that I had to be up early the next morning and so had to leave. He just sat there, grinning at me and saying, "I had a great time tonight." He was obviously hoping for an invitation back to my place, which he wasn't getting. We sat there awkwardly for about 5 minutes with him throwing out not so subtle hints to me before I finally said, as firmly as I could, "Look, this was fun, but I really do have to go. Take care." After waiting hopefully for a few more seconds, he finally lifted himself out of my car, which immediately jumped back up several inches with a vacation of his weight, and watched me as I sped out of the parking lot. He called me on my way home. I ignored it. He called me again a half hour later. I ignored it again. Finally, he IM'd me and said, "I can already tell that I'm in love with you. I want to be exclusive. I don't want you seeing any other guys." Frustrated, I replied, "Look, this isn't going anywhere for me. I'm sorry. I just got out of an LTR and I'm not ready to commit to anyone yet. Besides, I think you and I would be better off just as friends." Not that I was interested in being this guy's friend, but I wasn't capable of being too hard on him by telling him to get lost forever. His response, "I can't just be friends with you because I'll always love you and want more." "Sorry," I said. Him,
Can you at least promise me not to date anyone else until you decide you're ready for a relationship again? Me. Absolutely not. That's not something I'd promise anyone. Him. Then I can't ever see or speak to you again because it'll hurt too much. And he logged off. Thank God. Or so I thought. Cue several weeks of him calling, texting, and IMing me, leaving me messages that implied that he had completely forgotten his vow to never speak to me again. He kept telling me how much he loved me, begging me for another date and claiming that he was going to try to find out where I worked so he could show up. I ended up blocking him in every way I possibly could. He then created a new OkCupid account to get around my block and send me more messages. I blocked that account too. I eventually stopped hearing from him, but Jesus Christ, that was a scary experience for someone who had just been on her first date in 10 years. Story 3. Oh boy. Well, I was about 18 and working in the city, New York, at my father's printing shop. I'd met this guy a few days before on a bus going upstate to visit my friend. I tell my father I'm leaving early to go hang out in the city with a friend and I'm just going to take the train home from there. I meet up with a guy and almost immediately, he's weird. Think Pepe Le Pew, like he's trying to get all touchy-feely and huggy-squeezy on the subway. Then he pulls out a disposable camera and asks if he can take my picture and tell people I'm his girlfriend. I, of course, say no. But I was a big people pleaser and didn't want to hurt his feelings, so I didn't end the date. But I couldn't wait to get away. This continued until we were walking down some random street and some lumpy witch waddled up to me and just started getting in my face. It was his girlfriend. I kid you not. We're in Midtown Manhattan and we just happened to pass her by hanging out with friends. I tell her to get out of my face because I had no idea he had a girlfriend and I'm actually relieved she decided to show up. He starts to follow me and I just turn around and say, "Dude, you really don't want to do that. Trust me." Since my train wasn't for a while, I decided to go back to the office to wait. When I got there, I found my father cheating on my mother with a woman he hired to help with the filing. Story 4. In high school, I went out on a date with a guy from a different town who went to alternative high school. Well, sort of a date. He met me at Boomers, Dave & Buster's kind of place with outdoor go-karts and indoor arcade. You get the drift. To hang out with mutual friends. The date started with him making out with one of my male friends up against a pinball machine and ended with my mom dropping him off at his grandparents' house, where he insisted we come inside and see his pet iguana. His grandmother kept telling my mom her skin was so soft and attempted to pet her, while his grandfather sat in the corner facing the wall. I was in the most confused state I've ever been in my entire life. I didn't call him again, despite receiving multiple calls from him. A few weeks later, after the first date, I got a string of IMs from him telling me he was going to be coded on pills because he was in love with me. Deciding to err on the side of caution, I called 911 and IM'd him, telling him so. He IM'd me the next day, saying a bunch of BS about how I saved his life and that he was forever in my debt. For a while after that, about once a week or so, I would come home from school to a bouquet of roses on my doorstep. Then I came home once to his grandfather's car in the driveway. My grandfather gets out and tells me that I should just date his grandson already. He also told me that I was a witch for calling 911 when I should have just gone over to his house to check on him, since he was behind him at the computer telling him what to type, and also said that he had been the one dropping off the bouquets on my doorstep. Jesus Christ. Story 5. About 5 or 6 years ago, I met a girl that came into my work. I talked to her for a little bit. We seemed to really hit it off. She asked me if I wanted to go get dinner sometime. She said she'd come pick me up and everything. That weekend, we went out together to a restaurant on the other side of town. She was very interesting to me. I really didn't tell her a lot about myself because I kept asking her questions about the various things she was talking about. We just finished eating. I told her that I was going to get our meal since she drove us there. I just given the waiter my debit card when I blacked out. This has happened 2 other times in my life, so it's not common. After my seizure was over, everyone in the restaurant was around me. People were holding my legs and arms, everyone was scared and someone called an ambulance. I call it my down feeling. It's the mood I'm in after I have a seizure. Everything seems different and it's kind of hard to explain. In this state of mind, I get up to my feet. I looked all over the restaurant for her and she had already left. I thought she went to get help. I made the EMS people wait for her as long as I could. I tried calling her. I didn't get out of the hospital until 1 a.m. I had to walk 7 miles home because we don't have public transportation in this town. I never heard from her again after that. Story 6. A few years ago, I met a guy at a bar who was born on exactly the same day as me. That seemed like reason enough to accept his offer when he asked me out. He told me to dress up very nicely as we'd be attending an art gallery opening. I got all dolled up and when he came to pick me up, he was in a t-shirt and jeans.
Okay, maybe I'd misunderstood the attire requirement. We got there and it was in a warehouse out in the middle of nowhere. It was actually an art gallery, but barely. Some of his friends were there, but he wouldn't introduce me to them and proceeded to chat with them and ignore me the entire evening. Meanwhile, I'm dressed to the nines and they're also all in jeans. After we left, he asked me if he could take me out to dinner. I figured, whatever. At least I'd get a free meal out of this awful evening. We hit up a nice pizza joint and ordered a pizza. As I reached for a second slice, he just looked at me and said, "Wow, a second slice? Really? Jeez, you're a house." So I ate the rest of the pizza. At least she didn't have to worry about burning any calories that night. Story 7. My biggest fail of a date is when I met a girl one night at a party that one of my not-so-close friends was having. She was pretty attractive. She was really outgoing and fun to be with. So after the night of getting to know this woman, I was infatuated with her. So I decided to ask her on a date. She said, sure. So we went on this date, which she decided would be fun. She drove me to a huge bridge outside of the Loop in Chicago, and I was a little confused. I asked her what we were going to do, and she just said, wait. So I waited in silence for about a minute when she took my hand and squeezed it harder than the Hulk and started screaming and crying about how she wanted to end and give up on life. I tried to comfort her, but she just said I was a schmuck for not seeing that she was depressed earlier, so she ran in her car and drove away, leaving me 3 miles from the apartment. Story 8. Not as mortifying as some I've read, but by far my worst date. It was my first day with a guy I met online. We'd had some nice conversations and decided to meet up one night for sushi. The night started off well enough and I was really enjoying myself. About a half hour into the date, he starts getting a crap ton of texts and calls from who he claims is his dad. Being the slightly naive girl I was 4 years ago, I shrugged it off. But the texts kept coming. He never bothered to put his phone on silent and checked every single text. He said his dad wanted to go work out with him. At that point, I had a good handle on what was going on. Look, I told him, if you aren't into me, that's fine. But have the guts to tell me instead of relying on your buddy to bail you out. Actually, he replied while standing, it's a call. Thanks for dinner. And he left. I sat there for a little bit, embarrassed as hell because of all the sympathetic glances from other patrons. The server brought the check over. She leaned down to me and whispered, I heard what happened. I took that schmuck's order off so you only are paying for what you ate. That's when I started crying in the middle of the restaurant. I left the server a massive tip for her generosity and spent the rest of the night drowning my sorrows in wine, Ben & Jerry's, and Love Actually. Story 9. I was at a party once and got approached by a girl. She wanted to set up a double date with me and my buddy and her friend. My friend and I accepted. This date was kinda ugly, but he agreed to take one for the team. The day of the date, the ugly friend canceled on him, which was probably because it was just a setup for me and girl A in the first place. Okay, sure, we go on. So we set up a movie and went to see it. After the movie, she wanted to go back to her dorm or apartment complex and hang out with her pals. The day was going okay, so I agreed. It wasn't odd. College age. I was 20 or so. I think she was 22. So we hang with her roomies for a while. Things are okay. Then they want to get out, so they leave. I offer to leave, like a normal gentleman, and she indicates I should stay for a little. I agree. He put on another movie and I made a move to kiss her, and we kissed for a minute or so. Then, suddenly, she pulls away without warning and immediately gets really agitated. She wants to know where things are going, and before I can answer, she begins crying very, very hard. She goes off on a tangent for about an hour about all these very odd issues she's having and how nothing is right and all men are going to mistreat her and so on. Now, within the first minute of the freak out, I'm thinking, okay, this is over. Let's find an exit strategy. This girl is obviously not ready for anything. But this was a mistake, because I started asking questions out of morbid curiosity. As it turns out, I'm like the second person she's ever kissed, and how she's pure because her mother was super overbearing and never let her date, and told her all men were going to end her. She thinks because I kissed her that we have to have intimacy now, but first she wants to call my parents and make sure I'm not a criminal. Can she do a background check on me and see my grades? Oh, no, wait, it's back to the intimate subject, and she says she wants to, but she's afraid and doesn't know what to do. And so at this point, I stop her. I tell her that I've had a few girlfriends in my time and that she's better off finding someone a little less experienced, since she's not. I tell her I'm not interested in intimacy right now, nor a relationship. Well, I totally was in both parts, but not with crazy people. I told her the connection between us was good. It's just not right for us to sleep together. She cries really hard again, but agrees that it's not the right time, not the right person, etc. I go home, chalk it up to a bad night. Now, mind you, All this girl had was my name and telephone number. I think she had the telephone number from my friend. The next morning at 7 a.m. or so, I get a knock on my door. I don't live on campus. I live way off campus with roommates. It's her. Now I'm freaking out because how did she find my house? She's got flowers with a card. She's still crying and she apologizes for her behavior the night before and wants me to wait to read the card until after she leaves. I agree and she tearfully walks away. I go inside. The card says, I'm paraphrasing of course, I really like you. I know I probably scared you away, but if you ever want to give it a chance, give me a call. Right about the time I think, well, maybe someday. An intensely loud pounding starts in the front door. I answer. It's her. She's screaming and in tears. I ask why, and she's livid at me for not reading the note and chasing after her. Now I'm thinking, what the hell, times 10 to the millionth exponent. But I calmly explain I need some time to think about it, especially since she just started trying to break down my door. She falls on the floor crying. I attempt to console her, and she flails at me and cries harder. I wait for like 10 minutes for her to stop crying, and she agrees to give me some time. She walks away again. It's not 30 seconds before the pounding on the front door starts again. This time, I'm done. I'm not going to answer. I explain what's happening to the roommates and they don't answer either. She spends the next hour screaming threats at the front door, crying and pounding on the door. I was just about to call the police before she left. Next morning, she repeated the whole thing with a bigger bouquet and slightly less screaming, more pitiful crying, but it lasted only about 15 minutes because I threatened to call the police through the door and she called me names and ran away. I saw her only once more, about 5 years later, and after a friendly hi, she told me that she was really glad we hadn't dated, because she had a new boyfriend now, and that I was probably never going to change my mind. The guy was there with her, and I'll admit she was a hottie, but the guy looked like Quasimodo. Story 10. The day was arranged by the college newspaper where I was attending school. I had never met, nor seen the person who I would be courting that night. I was only told that all expenses would be paid for. I was a college student. How could I turn down free food? We met up at a local Greek place while being followed by a film crew. She was great, charming, cute, funny, and could hold her own in a conversation. However, much like that exact Lego piece that you really need in a tub full of Legos, her crazy was well hidden. After the meal, we went for a long walk on the beach. A few minutes in, she leans in close and whispers, "Let's ditch the film crew." When a fairly hot girl asks you to find a way to get to a secluded place, logic is overtaken by hormones. The second they turned their heads, we made a dash for it. We found a lifeguard tower that wasn't in use, and we made our way up the ramp. It was perfectly secluded, and it had the tactical advantage of being able to see if anyone was approaching. I leaned in for a kiss, expecting that was what she wanted. "Wait," she said. She was excited at this point, and she made no effort to hide it. "Do you want to see my scars?" "No biggie. I've had creepier things said to me, and I figured it was an excuse she was making. I was game. Sure." All across her stomach was deep, crazy scars. "Want to give me one?" What? What are these from?" "Memories. Give me one." She pulls out a weapon from her purse. The crazy was no longer hidden. "I've done it before. We'll just say that I fell while we were climbing the lifeguard tower. I think that the film crew found us. They were a good 50 yards away and were oblivious to the fact that they were there. I stood up and waved, faked a blush like we were being naughty as this chick with a weapon was hidden below me. She was not pleased and had a weapon. I was mentally saying goodbye to my currently not harmed body and was praying it would stay that way. The cameras were on though. She knew she had to play nice, lest her crazy be known to all. She hid the weapon, stood up and giggled. The day continued. We played laser tag. I elected not to give her my number at the end of the night. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 11. I met a girl online. She seemed reasonably attractive and fairly easygoing, so I figured, hey, why not? We met at a local coffee shop and chatted for a few minutes before a mutual acquaintance of ours happened to show up out of nowhere and begin talking to the two of us. Turns out they were both in AA together, and I then proceeded to learn her long and sordid history of drinking problems, and the real reason for her wanting to date. Her exact words were, "I'm trying to replace my boyfriend who passed away this summer." So the guy decides to invite himself along for our date, neither of them asking me if it was cool for him to do so. We end up driving to a bar, a fine thing for a couple of recovering drinkers to do, and the entire time they're playing the absolute most god-awful music on the radio I can think of. I'm in the backseat, this horrible thing blaring over the speakers while the two of them are chatting, and I'm thinking to myself, dear God, how can I find a way to get out of this?
So we go to the bar and they proceeded to drink coffee and play air hockey while I tried to think of a way to leave. I ended up faking a cell phone call from my friend, saying I needed to go because she was in the hospital. The girl then proceeds to freak out at me for bailing on her during our date, at which point I just stared blankly at her for a second, blinked, and walked away. Story 12. First date. Beautiful ice blue eyes, curly blonde hair, German as hell with a very thick accent. She was very skinny but wearing baggy clothes, so I didn't think much of it. Germans wear weird stuff, right? The day goes awesome. We eat some food, during which she keeps going to the bathroom. Then we eat some ice cream, during which she also keeps going to the bathroom. Then we go for a walk and hold hands. And eventually we end up checking into a matrimonial suite at a youth hostel. We are making out when suddenly she stands up and backs away. Then she says, in her thick accent, "Don't you like what you see?" and takes off her clothes. It is at this point that I realize that she has a disorder. She starts begging me to have intimacy with her, and I think to myself, wow, this is really a pickle, as I have no attraction to her anymore. But I don't want to be a schmuck and have her put her clothes back on because she clearly has some major body issues. So I start kissing her, generally trying to both diffuse the situation while also not rejecting her. Somehow, an hour later, we ended up reclothed, holding hands, and fell asleep on the bed. I think I was pretty gentle about it, and we kept up in emails for a little while afterwards. She always seemed fairly positive towards me. Story 13. I had my first date ever in 9th grade, all planned out with a girl I really liked. When I was running through the plan with my friends, they reminded me how socially awkward I was, and that if I couldn't carry the conversation throughout the date, there wouldn't be a second one. So being the smooth guy that I am, I decided to prepare by Googling how to talk to a girl and conversation starters an hour or so before the date. But I was too nervous to memorize the questions, so I wrote them down on my palm for future reference. We went to a sushi place at her suggestion. Of course, I say I love sushi to convince her I am sophisticated and worldly gentleman, but I'd never had the stuff before. Turns out that the green substance they put on the side of the sushi roll is not, in fact, guacamole. It is wasabi sauce, which I can only describe as a combination of horseradish, fire, and hell. So I ate the whole chunk of it, and there I am, practically sobbing and oozing out of my nose when I decide to distract her with a tactical conversation starter. The only problem is, my palms were too sweaty and all the ink had erased. I didn't notice while I was wiping the wasabi-induced storm off my face, so now my face was covered in ink while she stared blankly at me, wondering what to do. I saw myself in the reflection of the window, and I was in so much pain and so mortified that I just started crying. We ended up having to call my mom to pick us up early. Shut up. I was in 9th grade. I drove home in silence except for the oldie station my mom had playing on the radio. My mom let me use her sweater to wipe my face off. We ended up being friends later on in high school and laugh about it now. To this day, she thinks I was only crying from the wasabi. Well, that's one way to make a lasting impression. Story 14. I was working at a science fiction convention in the late 1980s as a roving security. I was paired up with this cute young woman, we'll call Alice. I felt she had potential. She was smart, witty, funny, and laughed at my jokes. It was obvious we were hitting it off. The only thing I worried about was that she looked a bit young, but she had to be over 18 to be working security, and they check ID. Near the end of our shift, we decided to go out and have dinner together. "I'll grab my purse back in my room and meet you in the lobby," she said. "Actually, I don't have anywhere else to go. Mind if I just tag along?" I asked. "Sure," she said, with a bright smile. My heart skipped a beat. On the way to her room, we talked and talked like we had been doing all shifts. She was doing flirty things like playing with her hair and biting her lower lip when we made eye contact, and we were both being comfortably dorky. When we got to her room, she said, "I'll be right back," and unlocked the door. When she opened the door, it was apparent her roommates were not expecting her, and it was apparent that Alice had no idea her roommates were into group intimacy. Truthfully, from what I could see, it was just about to start. There were people, there was a huge tarp, some scented oils, and a few of the women were fluffing the men. I don't think anyone in the room was under 180 pounds, and the few that were skinny were not the kind of skinny that one would find attractive to any era standards, like a combination of cottage cheese and cauliflower with a few pretzel sticks mixed in. But to each their own, consenting adults all around. I looked at Alice, a little fearful that this was an intentional encounter, but when I saw her face, I saw her look more shocked than I was. Her jaw dropped and stuttered. Her face turned white and she almost fainted. Oh my God. Oh, no. Oh my God. Oh God. She looked at me, dumbstruck and white as a sheet. "You didn't think I would never be involved. Oh God." One of the women who was at the door went, "Oh, Alice, I didn't know you'd be back tonight. We were going to be done by 9 and... Oh no. Oh dear." She threw on a towel and went to comfort Alice, who by now was sobbing and shaking in shock. Then the woman took Alice in and closed my door in my face like I wasn't even there. I wondered what just happened. Finally, I knocked on the door, then I heard Alice sob louder. The woman answered and said, "Punk, look, Alice is a little out of sorts. Let us calm her down and she'll meet you in the lobby." Okay. About an hour later, the woman found me. "Look, Punk, I'm so sorry. Alice is my niece and she was traveling with us. She had no idea this was going to happen and she wanted you to know she had no intent to bring you into our group. I mean, she's a little naive and we didn't expect her to return so early. I guess that's my fault. Alice decided to drive home. She doesn't approve of our games and it's probably for the best. I know her mother is going to have a fit, but sorry about all this. Alice really liked you, but I think we embarrassed her so badly she can't face you." I said I understood. I gave the woman my phone number to give to Alice. Never heard back from her. Story 15. So I met this girl at an over 30 nightclub. I'm 24 and pretended I was 30. She was 30. We arranged to meet up again the next day. I drive her over to hers on my motorbike. We meet up and go to this pub. Spend a while having a few drinks and stuff. She's mega in the mood the whole time. Go back to her house and end up in her room. Do all the dirty deeds imaginable. All good? That's not a fail. I hear you. Hold up. I'm pretty lucky in that I don't get hangovers. I do, however, get a really, really awful mess after a night drinking. As I mentioned, we met the night before, where I'd been drinking. I feel my stomach bubbling up. It's about 4 a.m. by now. She has 3 female flatmates, so it's so quiet in this place. If you dropped a needle, your ears would ring for minutes. I open her door, trying not to wake anybody. I'm there. The toilet is one small step directly across the corridor. I'm sitting there at this point in the loo, feeling my stomach whirling around. There's this funny thing I've since learned about missing. The quieter you try to be, the louder you are. It starts. It sounds like my back is exploding. Every time I release even a tiny bit, I'm making the loudest farting sounds you can imagine. I try turning the taps on. I flush the chain. There's literally nothing I can do to drown out the sound of me. It just goes on and on and on. I give up trying to be quiet. Her toilet is destroyed. I begin to laugh to myself. The loudest mess of all time. Why now? Eventually I finished up. I open the door and take the tiny step across the corridor to her room. She's sitting upright in her bed. "I think you better go." "Me too," I reply. "What the hell did you eat?" she inquires. I grab my clothes and start to leave. She seems to have a change of mind all of a sudden. "You don't actually have to go." Anyway, I get on my bike and make my way home. In the middle of the motorway, my bike cuts out. It's 5 a.m. I check my phone. I ended up going to sleep on the side of the road. The end. Story 16. I am a 25-year-old male. I let a friend set me up on a blind date. She told me this girl was a reasonably attractive brunette who was witty and funny and very honest and outgoing. I don't like blind dates, but this friend loves to matchmake and was sure we would be the best couple ever. Fast forward to date day. I'm shown a picture of this girl for last reassurances and she looks alright. I'm pretty optimistic. I phone her and we agree to meet at Buffalo Wild Wings for a few drinks and some food on a Thursday night. All good signs of things I can get behind. I agree to meet her at 8 p.m. I arrive about 7:50 and text her I've arrived and I grab a table since it's busy. She responds that she's on the way. 8 p.m. She's not on time. 8:15, still nothing. I order a drink. 8:25, still nothing. This waitress is flirty and fun though. I order an appetizer. 8:35, still nothing, so I start eating the appetizer. Drink number 2 arrives. 8:45, she still hasn't shown up. No call and no text from her, and it looks like I'm going to be stood up. I should have left 30 minutes ago, but I wanted to not be stuck up and give up on a good friend of one of my best gal pals. Finally, 8:50 comes and the girl arrives, and holy cow was I in for a surprise. This photo of an athletically built brunette weighing about 120 and standing 5'6" couldn't be any more radically wrong. I'm guessing the photo I was shown was her at like 18 or 19, or a senior picture from high school. Before me is a mildly ridiculous oaf of a woman. Fiery red, curly hair with obviously brunette roots, and 100 pounds over her photo comes over to the table and introduces herself and she says she's sorry she's late and nothing else. We proceeded to have the most awkward 45-minute experience I've ever had. She had terrible body language, awful eye contact. Oh, and she was witty and funny, alright? In that way, people say,
I'm so funny. Aren't I quirky and adorable? Yeah, she was one of those. Annoying as hell. Vapid as hell. About as deep as a toothpaste cap. She pretended her honesty was intelligence. And it definitely wasn't. I'd never been more turned off. So after 45 minutes, we finished our dinner and packed up and went our separate ways. But that lovely waitress came back over and expressed she was happy that I didn't get stood up. And I let her know a good friend set me up, and I told her I would have left if she hadn't been there to keep me company. Got her digits, she's still my girlfriend. Story 17. Internet date horror story. So I had just gone out of a long-term relationship and was being encouraged to get back into the game and not sit around sulking. So I decided to join OkCupid. I decided to message a few girls my first night, and then I largely ignored it for a few weeks until one night I got a response. I checked the girl's pictures out and I thought it a little odd she only had pictures of her face from an angle that sort of ignored the rest of her. But we started talking, and before long, I actually did enjoy speaking with her. Then one night out of the blue, she proclaims, "We must meet right now to figure this out because I think I love you." So I agreed to meet her at Starbucks. I'm waiting there, and this incredibly large girl shows up and introduces herself. All the while, I'm trying to remain calm and collected. We bought a drink and started talking, and she was actually pretty interesting, except every 2 damn seconds she asked me, "So do you like the way I look? Can you see this happening?" The day continued into dinner when she ordered more food than I could ever consume in one sitting. And I'm not a small guy. And she proceeded to eat it all while talking to me and continually asking me if I liked what I saw. I paid for dinner and was going to politely tell her it just wasn't going to work. And she tried to ambush me in the parking lot. It was then and only then that I gained the speed of Neo from the Matrix and hugged her while at the same time avoiding the kiss. She asked me one final time if I liked what I saw, and my response was, "I wouldn't have minded it so much if you hadn't taken a magnifying glass to your insecurities." She then, in an act of pure defiance, pulled out some sort of candy bar from her purse and said, "I'm happy with how I look, and you would have gotten lucky tonight." And you know what? All the power to her. Just don't ask me if I like you every 2 seconds. Story 18. My good friend, Vicky, and her husband, Will, a surgeon, are always trying to set me up. Always. I usually turn down their offers, but they talked up this guy, Ben. He seemed like a great guy. Smart, a doctor, and his TMNT collection was bigger than mine. He took me to a pretty nice place for dinner, and I was kind of nervous, but nothing bad. And then he spilled his drink on purpose. I saw it, so I was like, "What?" Then he started talking like a baby. "Oopsie, I spilled my drink. I'm a white boy." And I was like, "Ben, are you okay?" And he kept at it. Baby talk, looking all coy, and then I'm not making this up, asked if Mommy wanted to hurt her bad boy. I was out of there. I just got up from the table and walked out. He ran after, talking normally, apologizing. I had to wait for my code at Kochek. I accepted his apology and assured him I wouldn't tell Vicky and Will about his interest. And then he went to hug me, and it lasted a little too long. I pushed him away, and, well, there's no polite way of saying it. He whizzed in his pants. I, have no proof, but yeah, he did. Against my leg. I ran away. So yeah, worst date ever. Story 19. It's a fairly long story, but basically, on date number 2, I went number 2, in my pants, in her car. So it was date number 2, and she insisted that she wanted to drive this time. I had no problem with that, and we decided to do the whole dinner and a movie thing. She picked me up at 5, and we headed to Cheeseburger in Paradise. We ate, had a couple drinks, and headed out. We had over an hour before the movie started, so we decided to head out to a little city park that was about a mile from the theater. It was a nice day. Birds singing, not too hot, gentle breeze. Little did I know how hard the coming crash would be. So we're walking the short loop through the park, making small talk. Nothing too interesting when I become acutely aware of that feeling. You know, the one that makes your lower gut feel like it's about to mimic Vesuvius. That or an angry badger has been camping in your gut and now wants out. Right now. I didn't say anything, just let her keep talking while I feverishly looked for a public restroom where I could decimate a stall. No dice. At this point, the urge had settled a bit. I figured the best course of action was to beeline back to her car and go to the theater, where there were sure to be many public restrooms. So we headed back to her car. I should mention at this point that this day was particularly timid, very sweet-natured, but timid to a fault. Like she moved slowly and mousily. Is that even a word? And even drove 5 miles per hour under the speed limit. Just as we pull out the park, the urge comes back. This time, it's not messing around. We make it about 3/4 of a mile when we stop at a red light, that had just gone from yellow to red, and now we wait. And wait. And wait. My vision tunneled, and all I could think is, screw you, traffic light, screw you. After what seemed like an eternity, the light changed to green. House seat 8 then proceeds to move at 5 miles per hour maximum speed to get to the movie theater parking lot. Then, as if Thor himself brought his hammer down, there was no holding back. As I white-knuckled her passenger door, the gates let loose with a substance that can only be described as borderline inhuman. I can only describe the subsequent few minutes as a blur because I hauled myself to the theater's bathroom as fast as I could. It didn't really matter, though. What was done was done, witnessed by any number of the bystanders waiting to buy tickets. I wasn't sure who to feel worse for, though. Myself or them for being exposed to it. While I was in the restroom, I texted her, "Just go home." Amazingly, she wanted to stay. I said, "No, seriously, go home." In the days and weeks that followed, the date actually claimed she didn't care at all about the fact that I disgraced her car. She wanted to keep dating. Somehow, I wasn't comfortable dating a girl who was cool with the fact that I took an enormous mess in her car. Later, I was diagnosed by a gastroenterologist with IBS. The event actually created some lasting social anxiety until one day I realized that was a waste of time, and it's a lot more fun to laugh about it. So I do. I mean, I've already made a mess in a date's car. What's the worst I could do? Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.